August 30th, 1989. I'm a sergeant in homicide. I was in my office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon reviewing old murder cases.
It's Kenda.
Sergeant, you're needed in the conference room.
Okay.
So that she would never reveal it. So I go to the conference table. The room is pure white. Well, that's a little odd. The table, the chairs, the walls, everything in the room is white. And sitting around the table are the victims of my cases. They're in various states of decomposition. Their clothing is torn, there are insects crawling on them. There is a river of dead that flows past me every night. When I wake up from one of these dreams, I'm sick to my stomach and soaking wet.
Joe, are you okay?
I could tell when he was having a nightmare because he'd thrash around in the bed.
Was it that dream again? Do you want to talk about it?
No, I'm okay.
He would shut down. He would be quiet. He wouldn't say anything. He'd stare off in the distance.
As a child, I was not aware of Dad having nightmares, not at all. He was very strong for us.
And it was bad enough that my mom had to deal with it. And I think he was just conscious about not wanting to burden his kids with that as well.
I wish you'd talk to me about your job. I hate seeing you so upset, and I don't even know what's going on.
I never told Kathy for a long time, years, I never told her. I thought it was just cruel. Why do that? Why make her suffer like I'm suffering?
Well, if you don't talk to me, you should talk to someone.
I'm gonna head to the station, get an early start.
It was maddening at times. He'd just keep on doing whatever he was going to do.
I had always treated my employment as a mission, that I was going to make a difference in the world no matter what it took or no matter what the cost. I had not given much thought to retirement, but there were parts of my brain that kept knocking at that door. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do when you stop doing this and looking at dead people? And it was a fleeting thought.
This is Kenda.
I had no clue when that call came in that this would be a situation I would never, ever forget. And to this day, I still cannot forget.
The Shangri-La Trailer Park was one street over from the station where I worked for quite a few years. It's a really nice mobile home park. It's very well kept.
Thanks.
The officer standing on the porch of this trailer knows me. He looked at me, and next to his leg, he held 3 fingers. Now, he's telling me there are 3 dead people in this trailer. And I'm thinking, oh, great.
So what do we got?
This one's a real bad one.
Any witnesses?
The landlord. But he's really distraught right now.
Hey, Joe.
Stay.
Got here as soon as I could. I had actually been on Colorado Springs Police Department for approximately 9 years.
Let's take a look inside.
I was off duty that day, and I just happened to be on call.
Oh, man. That's bad.
So we walk into this trailer. It's hot. There are flies in the place attracted by the blood. There's a woman in the kitchen sitting on the floor, halter top pair of shorts, in her early 30s. When you smell death, you never forget that. Ever. I've smelled it too often.
Looks like she's been here all night.
You become rather accomplished at determining time of death because you see so much of it. Based on the blood and the rigor mortis in the body, I would say 12 hours.
2 gunshot wounds to the head. Close range, small caliber.
I recall her being propped up against the refrigerator in a very awkward position, as if she had not expected that shot that came her way.
We have an ID on the body?
Yeah, we found her driver's license.
She is Cynthia Anderson, and she's 32 years old.
As detectives scan the crime scene for clues, they narrow in on a curious detail.
Is it just me or does it look bare in here?
Yeah, just a Bible, some dirty dishes, and a purse. Did you find anything in there?
Just a wallet, no cash or valuables.
At first blush, Kenda wonders if the carnage in the trailer is a robbery gone awry.
You look at this trailer, the first instinct you have is there any evidence of forced entry?
Yeah, the door looks undisturbed.
Yes, sir. We checked all the windows. They're all secure.
The idea of this being a burglary by a stranger does not have any apparent facts to support that, initially at least.
Where the other victims at?
Back here in the bedroom.
There is a Caucasian male, approximately 30 years old, laying on the floor. He's got a gunshot wound to the right temple. And there is a Jennings .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol on the floor.
Hammer's cocked. Looks like it's been fired.
The pistol is ready to fire again. So you have to be careful when you handle these things because you touch that trigger and somebody's going to get shot.
I thought you said there were 3 victims.
In the bed.
There is a 5-year-old boy clutching a stuffed animal. This kid has 2 entry-exit contact gunshot wounds to the side of his head. And because of the angle of the bed, he has bled out. He's wearing pajamas. My son had those pajamas when he was little. The very same ones.
Joe, you okay?
I saw my son Dan laying there in those pajamas with 2 holes in his head.
Joe. Joe.
I gotta go outside. Sorry.
When you start doing this for a living, you build armor around your heart. You have to protect yourself from the horrors that you see. But there are times when something will go through that armor like a stiletto. We're investigating the death of 3 people by violent means. We know who one of them is, Cynthia Anderson, and she's 32 years old, and an unknown male. And even worse, we have a child, very small. It's the worst nightmare scenario involving the violent death of a child, but it's something you have to get to the bottom of. I have to. It's my job.
Sadly, I have covered several of these cases, and they don't leave you, ever. Particularly when you have children, it's just too easy for your head to go, what if that were mine?
Hey, Kath, it's me.
When he was working, sometimes he would call and say, won't be home for dinner.
Honey, you don't sound so good.
There's a kid involved.
I knew the kids really got to him, the young adults even, and the children and the babies.
That was an unspoken moment between she and I. She never questioned me as to what happened. All she wanted to know was that I was still alive.
Don't wait up for me.
Okay. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Children were always my kryptonite. I mean, I just could not get past that. I could not. And I would do whatever it would take to punish the person responsible for that event.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to check in with my wife.
Of course.
Did you find any IDs on those 2 bodies?
Moore tells me they've identified the male in the back bedroom as 32-year-old Scott Anderson, and he is the husband of Cynthia Anderson, who's dead in the kitchen. And their child, 5-year-old Scotty.
All of the gunshot wounds appear to be consistent with the 22 found in the bedroom.
Most likely scenario, Scott wiped out the whole family.
This has the initial appearance to me of being a murder-suicide. That's my opinion.
While the scene suggests that Scott Anderson killed his own wife and child before turning the gun on himself, it's still entirely possible that someone else is responsible.
We have one opportunity to really get it right and make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions.
We need to find out if anyone stopped in this trailer last night.
I'm on it.
The issue in any case involving multiple victims is who is a potential enemy of these people. So I'm going to talk to the person who called it in, which is the owner of the trailer.
This is Mark Brown.
I'm Sergeant Kenda. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Okay.
Can you just walk me through what happened this morning?
Yeah, well, my wife, Jenny, came over to help them pack some boxes. Supposed to be moving out tomorrow.
When he got to the trailer, he got no answer at the door.
You talked to her, right?
She said she'd be home all morning.
Mr. Brown reports that he knocked several times, and when he didn't get a response,
Hey, Cynthia?
he tried the doorknob and it wasn't locked.
Typically in a landlord situation, you would not go in, but they were friends and they were helping her.
Cindy?
What the hell is that smell?
What?
First thing he sees is Cynthia Anderson shot to death on the kitchen floor.
Jenny, no, stop.
What?
She's dead. All right, she's dead.
What?
I've never seen anything like this.
And what happened next?
He said he went to a neighbor and found a phone and called the police, and then he sent his wife home because she was so overcome with grief.
Did you go inside the trailer?
No. I just opened the door. Please tell me that little boy is okay.
I said, Mr. Brown, I'm very sorry to inform you that little boy is certainly not okay. He was overcome by that. He liked that little kid. Who wouldn't?
That's okay. We can talk later.
With no other promising leads, The pressure is on for Kenda to find out who killed the entire Anderson family.
Fighting crime / bringing justice was an obsession for Joe. It really bugged him when he couldn't get the knot completely unraveled. I mean, there are still a couple of those cases, and they drive him nuts.
Kenda, you have a minute? This is Cheryl Wright, one of the neighbors. She thinks she may have overheard the shooting.
Yeah, I mean, it was late.
She indicated that sometime around 11 p.m. that evening, she recalls hearing gunshots.
Heard like 4 or 5 loud pops. Sounded like fireworks. Then I heard a car drive off.
Did you see who got in the car?
No, I didn't see the car. I just heard it.
Oh, thank you for your time.
Sure.
What do you think?
It's hard to say. At first I thought Scott killed the whole family. Now it's starting to look like there's a third person involved.
According to what Cheryl Wright says, it's still possible that there could be someone else involved in this.
This throws another avenue into the equation. So it is extremely critical to make sure that we focus on what we know is factual.
We need to find out more about this family.
Have they had a confrontation in the recent past with perhaps a neighbor or a coworker or something like that?
I'll go check next to Ken, touch base with you later.
Great. I'll hang around here until the scene's wrapped up.
Later that evening, Detective David Moore checks in with Kenda on his findings.
I tracked down Scott and Cynthia's family. They're all over Wisconsin.
Really?
I also pulled a background check on Scott and Cynthia. Found something odd.
Moore also determines that they own a home together, Scott and Cynthia Anderson, and is located on Manitoba Drive, about a 40-minute drive from the trailer park.
Strange, right? Maybe they were renovating.
I don't know. Let's look into this.
So now the question is obvious. Why do you need 2 households? We don't know. It's our business to find out. We're investigating the death of Cynthia Anderson, her husband Scott, and her 5-year-old son Scotty from multiple gunshot wounds. We need to know what's going on in this family, and how could that lead us to who might have done this.
I set up a meeting for us early tomorrow morning.
Good.
Detective Moore had set up an interview with John Howell, who is a business partner to Mr. Anderson, to see what he may know about this family.
Great work. I'm gonna head home and get a shower and some shut-eye. You should too.
I probably won't sleep, but you gotta try, right?
With heavy hearts, Kenda and Moore head home to their families. But the memories of the crime scene still haunt them.
It certainly affected me as a father. I remember going home that evening and actually waking my son up and holding on to him and just thank God that he was there and safe.
It was always difficult for me to go home when you're working at murder case and walk in the door and be all smiles.
We knew that Dad sometimes had rougher cases than normal just by body language and by the level of stress.
Joe, is that you?
Hey.
Sometimes it was very hard for him to come home and shut it off.
Are you hungry? I saved you some chicken.
And I was thinking about that child in those pajamas.
Oh, I heard from Dan today. He's really liking his classes at college.
My son was 19 years old.
We have to pick out a weekend and go visit him. Joe.
I'm sorry, I'm not hungry.
I know you've had a tough day, but I need you to talk to me.
I think Kathy was upset on a number of occasions that I wouldn't let her in.
Sometimes I would be very sympathetic to it. Sometimes I would get very mad at it.
Maybe it's time to think about doing something different.
What?
Retiring, getting a new job, because this one's killing you.
Kathy became increasingly concerned that I would die as a result of this work, either at someone's hand or at a health problem that I would create by my never sleeping and eating bad food and all the things you do.
You know that's impossible. Just can't deal with this right now.
Me neither. I'm going to bed.
And in my heart of hearts, I knew that Kathy was potentially right.
The next morning, Kenda and Moore meet with Scott's business partner, John Howell, hoping for additional insight into the Anderson family.
Good morning, Mr. Howell.
Call me John.
John was an individual who owned a commercial window washing business.
I'm Sergeant Kenda, this is Detective Moore. Thank you for talking to us.
It's unbelievable. The whole family just gone. Who would do such a horrible thing?
Mr. Howell did say that there's no way Scott Anderson would have ever hurt his wife or his child. In his opinion, they're a loving, caring family, and they go to church on Sunday.
Scott and Cynthia had actually met one another in Wisconsin.
Cynthia was pretty far along with her pregnancy. The natural father left her, in a bad way.
Scott Anderson not only stepped up to dating a pregnant woman, but went so far as to name the baby after himself. He raised that child from birth to age 5.
They got married and moved here about 3 years ago. That's when we met. Started working together.
We understand they have a house on Manitoba Drive. Do you have any idea why they were living in a trailer on the other side of town?
Scott wasn't living there. Just Cynthia and the boy.
Really?
He said that 2 months prior to this event, that Scotty and Cynthia abruptly moved out of the house. So we asked Mr. Howell, why would they do that?
Was Scott seeing anyone else outside of the marriage?
No way. Scott and Cynthia were good Christians. And Scott said it was a bit of a squabble. Didn't say what.
But they were getting it settled, and Scott had told him he'd even prayed about it.
As a matter of fact, Scott had redecorated the home they had been living in, got new curtains, and was fully expecting Cynthia to move back.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
We're sorry for your loss.
My opinion of Mr. Howell is he knows little or nothing about these people's marriage or about their relationship. He's a business partner to this guy. He's not in his life. He doesn't know anything about his life.
But Kenda knows someone close to the Andersons that might be able to give him the insight he needs.
Now, we have never talked with Jenny Brown, the wife of the landlord. It's time to talk to Jenny to see what she can tell us.
Jenny was not in the emotional shape to be able to give a statement the night that the bodies were discovered. But she's got some information that's really gonna blow this open.
So how did you come to know the Andersons?
We met them through that awful church. Luckily, Mark and I escaped.
Excuse me?
She says it's a non-traditional church, and it's almost cultish.
Scott was so devoted. I swear to God, if they hadn't joined that church, they'd still be alive today.
Her opinion was that they all died because of this cult-like church. Well, that's something new now, isn't it? We've been investigating the shooting death of the Anderson family, Cynthia, her husband Scott, and their 5-year-old son Scotty. We've learned this might have occurred because of Scott's devotion to the church.
Why do you say that?
This church was very restrictive, and Scott took their teachings to the extreme. Cindy wasn't allowed to work or drive a car, and any extra money that they had went to that church.
Every man, according as he has purpose.
And the money that Scott was giving to this church was actually impacting his family and their ability to meet their needs.
He was just becoming more irrational every day. It was like it was all or nothing with Scott. It was crazy.
There was a lot of controlling factors involved in this church.
Cindy, what is this?
Just Scotty's lunch.
Cindy, what is wrong with you? This is not nourishment. This is not what God intends for our child.
But he's gotta eat, he's starving.
He's not eating that.
He used the Bible as an excuse to treat his wife like a slave.
He had gotten in his mind that processed foods were evil. And because all their money went to that church. She couldn't even afford to buy groceries.
And Scott Anderson was so devoted to this way of thinking that he told Jenny he'd rather see his son go hungry than eat these evil food products. Oh, swell.
A couple of months ago, she showed up on my doorstep with Scotty. Scott had hit her so hard that he knocked out one of her teeth.
We don't know exactly how, but he also abused Scotty. And for Cynthia, that was that. She made arrangements to get out, go to the mobile home, because nobody was going to hurt her baby.
So they moved in and things were looking up. But Scott figured out where she was working and he followed her to the trailer.
Which is very common in the abusive male personality. Mr. Anderson makes it his business to find them.
That bastard had to have the last word.
In Jenny's mind, there's no doubt that Scott Anderson is responsible for the deaths. Given the physical evidence I saw at the scene and knowing this, I don't disagree with her.
We'll let ourselves out.
We're sorry for your loss.
I just thought of something. Remember that Bible back at the crime scene?
Yeah.
When we get back to the station, want to have someone pull that from the evidence locker?
Found it.
Nobody's touched it since. Here it is.
So we open this up and start fanning through it. And in the middle of the Bible is a note. We take that out carefully.
They kept saying the same thing over. Why are you leaving me? This is not right. We need to make sure we get back together and make this work. It was a very disturbing note because there were threatening comments there.
Sick bastard.
While the evidence is overwhelming that Scott Anderson killed his entire family, Kenda and Moore need the coroner to make the final ruling.
So we stopped down to the morgue.
Hey, Doc. Hey. So what do you think?
The autopsies have been complete on all three people.
So Scott's wound to his right temple was a contact wound. I'm confident that it was self-inflicted. I think he turned the gun on his family and then turned it on himself. So I'm ruling this a double murder-suicide. But there's one more thing. She was pregnant. What? Yeah, it was early on. I'm not even sure that she knew herself.
It makes me sick to my stomach that Scott not only achieved his goal of killing his wife, killing her child, but killing their child also. I mean, that is pretty damn close to demonic.
Based on the evidence and witness statements, Kenda can surmise what happened to the Anderson family.
Scott!
My opinion is that he showed up at her house unannounced.
It's not a good time. You need to leave.
Not going anywhere until you listen to what I gotta say. You are my wife, and this isn't right. God is gonna punish you if you don't straighten up. Is that what you want?
I think he probably introduced that Bible into that house, pointing at it, pounding his fist on it.
Scott, it's over. Scotty and I are never, ever gonna move back in that house with you. I'm done. You need to get out.
Cindy, I talked to God today. He will save us all.
He's got a loaded gun in his pocket. He pulls out that gun.
He will save us all.
He then immediately walks down that bedroom hallway. His son is asleep in a bed. he puts that gun against his head. And shoots him twice. Bang, bang. And he steps back. And then the case was closed. We have a suspect who is deceased, Scott Anderson.
Nice work, Joe. Time to go home and get some rest.
What's so nice about it? The whole family's dead.
Joe, let's go home.
There are moments in my career when I was filled with venom. There is no justice in a murder-suicide. There is only the taking of human life for no true, definable reason.
There are always certain cases you'll never shake. This is one of them.
In the subsequent weeks and months, the Anderson case haunts Kenda on a nightly basis.
I'm like frozen solid, staring at this kid with gunshot wounds to the head in my son's pajamas. And I can't close my eyes. And I can't leave the room. When I would wake up like that, and I'd be soaked with sweat, and I'd be shaking and sitting on the bed, I'd look at Kathy, and she's just peacefully sleeping away like an angel.
The nightmares continue to take their toll until one day a case comes in that pushes Kenda to his breaking point.
I came into work, and it was a terrible start to the day. We were overwhelmed.
I got a guy in room 4 ready to confess, but I gotta go on a call.
How about you? Nobody?
Okay, I'll do it. Give me the file.
One of the people under arrest was a 74-year-old man who'd been arrested for sexual assault on a child. The victim was 5 years old.
Damn. That's repulsive. Okay, go. I got this. All right, appreciate it. Thanks.
About time.
Lieutenant Kenda, I understand you want to make a statement?
Yes, sir.
When I start talking to him, even though my skin is crawling at the time.
So how do you know this child?
My grandson. He's my daughter's youngest.
The rage is consuming me. I feel like I'm a volcano and I'm going to erupt.
I think we have a great relationship. Go to the park, do puzzles.
Why'd you do that to that little boy?
He came on to me.
And I lost it.
You son of a bitch.
In late August of 1996, I realized that my emotions were interfering with my ability to do my job. And I didn't realize how overwhelmed I was until I was talking to that old man about what he did to a 5-year-old boy.
You son of a bitch. I ought to kill you myself.
I really think about all the ways I could kill this guy and how much fun it would be to watch him die.
Lieutenant. Joe, are you okay?
This guy's crazy.
You shut your mouth.
And I said, get him out of my sight. Right now. Now.
Get up.
Go.
I know what I needed to do. I had been on the police department for 23 years and 6 months to the day, which equates to 106 years of doing anything else. And I sat there and I was sick to the stomach and my heart was going 400 beats a minute. I felt I was losing control of me. that I was becoming someone I didn't care for. And I didn't want that to be my legacy, that I was turning into some sort of a monster. So it was time to stop that. I'd tortured my own family, and I'd tortured myself on behalf of the citizenry of Colorado Springs. So I typed a single sentence. As of September 1, 1996, I am retired from the Colorado Springs Police Department. And I signed it. And that was that. It felt like somebody lifted an aircraft carrier off my head. I didn't walk out of there. I floated because I was lighter than air. I had no retirement ceremony. I didn't want the stale coffee and the stale cake. It didn't interest me. I wasn't doing that anymore.
See you Monday.
I was there on Friday.
Here you go.
Thanks.
And I wasn't there on Monday.
I was thinking about where we could go on a vacation. Maybe rent a cabin for a weekend.
Sounds nice.
Once he handed in his badge, I was very grateful. All the times of him working long hours, I really had a lot of concerns. Now, I didn't have to worry about Joe getting shot and killed anymore.
So, what are you gonna do today?
I have no idea.
Over the years, he slowly began to decompress.
And finally one day, Kathy looked at me and said, "You're the guy I married again." I wasn't a policeman when we got married. I thought that was very nice. Many years passed. I'd been retired for quite a while.
Good morning, Mr. Joe.
Good morning. So I thought I'd drive a school bus. Everybody take their seats, please.
And we're like, okay, Dad is driving a school bus. Never thought that would occur.
I loved it. The first job I ever had in my life, where everyone was happy to see me. Everybody ready to go to school?
Yeah.
Well, let's go to school in that case, all right? But there was always those nagging memories that pulled at me. PTSD happens when it chooses to. The best way to describe it is having a nightmare while you're awake. It takes your breath away. And it'll last for 15 or 20 seconds. And it's absolutely startling. I had kept everything bottled up in me when I was working, but now it's 8, 9, 10 years later. So I got a letter in the mail that changed my life. It's a letter from some guy that says he's going to put me on television. I'm like, that's going to happen.
And I said, well, you need to call him.
I'm not calling him.
No, you need to call him.
And she said, you know, I think it would be good for you to talk about these things. Finally, to keep peace in the family, I said, okay, I'll call him. Turns out he's a television producer who is very accomplished.
Basically, it was my mother who nagged him into it. That's probably the shortest version there.
What do you remember about that first interview you gave for the show?
The first season, the first time I started talking about this, it was a flood. They couldn't shut me up. It was like the dam broke. And here comes everything right now. I began to feel better, a little better all the time.
Because of talking on the show, the nightmares got less, the PTSD got less. The show helped him.
I think his analogy of the camera being like a therapist for him is true. People are not typically willing to share things that are painful to them. He is.
There's been a lot of benefits, actually, to the show. People want to talk to him and want to thank him for things that he's done. And he's just representative of many, many hardworking detectives that are out there in this country doing the exact same things, who aren't on TV, but are going through the exact same types of challenges in their lives.
And that's been very healing for him.
It has been my honor to entertain you. And it's also been my honor, hopefully, to educate you to some degree about how the world works and how people act and behave. And hopefully that can continue in some way. I've had a long and varied career, and I was successful at what I did. Will my passion ever stop for justice or finding the truth or locating people responsible for horrible things? No. That would never stop until I take my last breath. I put my badge down. I put it down. I can't put my desire down. It's part of me. If you could analyze my DNA, I think you'd find it there. Something I've always said, and I always meant. If you kill, I will find you.
Snow takes the city by the throat and squeezes. February 1998. A windshield of ice over Denver. Streetlights glow like distant flares. Sirens drag a blue ribbon across Colfax Avenue, then fade. A newsroom voice says, "Breaking overnight, a woman missing." Another headline that doesn't stick until it does. Her name is Lena Hart, 22, bartender by night, art student by day. A collage of small shift hours and bigger dreams. She leaves the Foxglove on Ogden just after 1 a.m., the closing crew waving her into the cold. She wraps the scarf twice, tucks a sketchbook into her coat, and chooses the long way home because the short way feels too quiet. The air tastes like a coin on the tongue. Her keys ring once, then the street swallows the sound. The alley is a thin strip of night with the lid half open. A delivery truck sleeps with its mouth ajar. Glass bins shiver when the wind nags them. A camera on the corner, grainy, grudging, blinks red and pretends to see. Lena's boots stamp little suns into the frost. Behind her, someone works a lighter again and again like a nervous habit, flame biting the wool of the wind and giving up. He steps in. He says something. She answers with silence because that's faster. The shadow moves. The wind moves. Denver does what cities do. It keeps going. Morning cracks open. The Foxglove's owner finds a dropped scarf, a clean cut through the weave. The color is a deep bruised plum. He doesn't touch it. He knows the difference between lost and left. By noon, the story has bones. Last seen, approximately, witnesses, none willing to say more than maybe. A detective with a jaw like a locked safe takes the case. His name is Saul Renteria. 20 years on the job, the kind of man who carries a pen that writes in any weather. He stands in the alley and feels the cold eat into his coat. He looks for a pattern. He doesn't find one, so he makes one. Start with the circle that fits the city, narrow until it hurts. The first pass is ritual. Trash sifted, dumpster lids lifted like the covers of bad books. Security tapes collected, labeled with dates like expiration warnings. On one tape, a blur that could be a car that could be anything. On another, a hand. Just a fragment, pale and quick, tugging at a door that isn't Lena's. On a third, nothing, which feels personal. A barback says she used to cut through the parking lot of the bakery because the ovens keep the air warm. The bakery says their ovens were out. The ovens say nothing. The city leans in, forehead to glass. Lena's apartment is a small upstairs box with a window that frames a neon pharmacy cross. Her bed is made. Her last painting, unfinished, leans against the wall like a witness called too late. The palette dries into little lakes. On the desk, a letter she never sent, torn in two, taped back together. The stamp is a moon it can't afford. In it, she writes, "If I leave, it won't be running. It will be choosing." No name on the envelope, no address. The detective reads it once, twice, and doesn't let anyone say what it sounds like. No one gets to write the ending in pencil. They walk the route, Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to Franklin. The crosswalk at Franklin is a rumor under slush. A glove stuck in the gutter with the fingers splayed like a starfish. It's not hers. The cameras are older than truth. A liquor store clerk remembers a girl with a scarf and a rushing kind of voice. He remembers coins. He remembers a man in a tan parka buying cigarettes and scratching at his wrist like something was trying to get out. He doesn't remember the brand. He remembers the laugh. Too loud, then too quiet. His memory is a snow globe someone keeps shaking. Rumor arrives before evidence. It arrives in the stairwells, in the smoking lots, in the corner booths put together like conspiracies. People want a shape they can be angry at. They draw one. Boyfriend did it. Stranger did it. She left. She staged it. She fell into the river that doesn't run there. The detective lets them talk until their certainty runs thin as breath on glass. He is watching men who smoke with the wrong hand. He is watching cars with mismatched tires. He is watching the pattern that isn't a pattern, not yet. Crime scene turns into holy ground. Candles appear, then notes, then lilies crusted with ice. A reporter practices his somber voice where police tape snaps in the wind. Cold case? He asked the camera. Not yet. Not on day 3. Not while dogs weave along the chain link fences like needles, sewing together the night with their noses. But the word plants itself. Cold. It carries, it sticks to Lena's name like frost. A week, 2, then the fearful normal. Leads go out with the recycling. The cameras tape over themselves, new stories elbow to the front, a carjacking, a warehouse blaze, a mayoral promise slick as rain. Lena's missing becomes a place you pass on your way to somewhere else. Detective Renteria keeps the file on his desk anyway, a stubborn square of paper in a city made of forgetting. He calls the lab and the lab says the word backlog with a sigh. He goes to the bakery and buys bread he won't eat. He asks about ovens. He listens to the nothing they give him like a doctor to a heart. You can hear the city when it tries not to speak. The radiator clatter hides a second heartbeat. The rails sing when no train is scheduled. The late-night bus slows at a stop no one stands at, as if expecting someone to materialize out of the cold. A janitor at the insurance office finds a key on the floor of the lobby, a small flat thing with a red plastic cap. He puts it on the lost and found hook. 2 days later, it's gone. No one asks. No one tells. In a different version of this story, that key opens a storage unit that opens into a second room that opens into a truth. In this one, it becomes a dot in a constellation the detective draws across his pinboard, all string and narrowed eyes and coffee gone dull in the cup. Time moves the way ice melts, quieter than you'd think. Spring doesn't forgive. It only forgets noisily. The foxglove replaces the hoses behind the bar. Tourists learn to say, Lodo, the alley is now the alley where. People lower their voices when they say it. A landlord paints over a phone number scrawled at shoulder height on the brick. Knock for Jason. Someone knocks anyway. No one answers. The camera on the corner blinks red and pretends it can't. Then, the fragment. In June, a woman walking her dog at first light near a drainage culvert off Josephine sees something that should not be there. A scarf the color of a bruise, caught on a root like a flag repaired badly. She doesn't touch it. She calls. The detective drives without sirens. He kneels in the dewy ditch and stares at a simple woven thing that has taught the city how to be afraid. It's been out here. Soaked and dried, scored by ice, bleached by sun, then hidden by careless grass. They bag it, they mark the spot, they comb the culvert until the day has no hair left. Fibers speak slowly. The lab says maybe, then probably, then yes. The scarf was Lena's. It yields one more thing, a whisper of skin that isn't hers, a ridge upon a ridge, a fingerprint almost too faint to be anything but stubborn. The database yawns and stays asleep. The detective puts the print back into the drawer marked wait. The city learns a new arrangement of the word hope, one that can hold disappointment without breaking. Years do a particular violence to faces and facts. They round them and sand them and sell them as stories to those who came after. The file grows heavier, but not with answers. The detective gets a new pen that writes in any weather. The case becomes a campfire ember blown back to life when the wind is right. A podcast episode, a late-night rerun, a column in the back pages about the unsolved that should not be. Lena's mother grows plants that thrive on neglect. She learns to talk to the detective without saying please find her in every line. He learns to talk to her without promising a thing. And then a day with teeth. August 2025. The news cycles in reverse. An arrest, the name like a hammer on tile. A man they did not circle. A man they saw and didn't keep. The print, the scarf, the culvert, suddenly everything with a handle. They say solved. They say closure. They say the word that is supposed to make everything go still. But listen closely. You can hear another word braided into it, a wire under velvet. You can hear the older word, the colder one, still whispering beneath the headline. Because solved is a stamp. It is not an answer. The city knows that now. The alley knows that. The bakery ovens, the blinking camera, the scarred brick with the painted over phone number. They know a softer thing, a truer thing, that a story can end without finishing. So the voice holds the last note a second longer. It lets the snow return to February and the wind find the seam of Lena's scarf for the first terrible time. It walks the route again, as if repetition is a kind of prayer. Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to Franklin, Franklin to the part where light doesn't reach. It does not hurry, it does not blink. It says the name the city learned in winter and kept saying into spring. It says her name and then the year and then the word they chose for the headline. It says it all and waits for the silence to answer back. They put the word solved in the crawl like it's a gasket that will stop the leak, like it will keep the city from seeping out through its own cracks. The arrest photo is a low-resolution bruise, a face smashed flat by the flash. His name is Evan Morrow, 49, maintenance tech, rental properties and cheap motels, a man who knows how to keep things running just long enough to get the deposit back. He lives 3 exits south in a building that was once a cheerful yellow and now looks the color of an old tooth. Tenants call him at odd hours about heat that clicks but doesn't warm, sinks that cough up brown water, mysterious smells that could be gas or grief. His mugshot says nothing. His eyes do the trick of looking straight ahead and nowhere at all. How he entered the story is a sentence that keeps changing its order. It began with the fingerprint, they say, a partial once too shallow to stand up in court, now thickened by software that teaches smudges to speak. A new algorithm, a new pass through the old drawer marked wait. But that wasn't enough. It took a bone-deep hum of coincidence. A new tenant in a different city filing a complaint about a landlord who kept a spare key on a red plastic cap in an unlocked utility closet. A veteran officer who remembered a janitor in 1998 who found a key just like that on an insurance office floor. 2 lines that had never touched, suddenly crossing as if the city had folded itself and the points met. The detective is older now. The jaw hasn't softened. It simply knows more names. Renteria stands in front of the cameras forced on him and explains what he can't explain. The scarf, the culvert, the partial print pressed like a thumb into a loaf of bread still warm, the witness at the liquor store who remembered a tan parka and an itch under the cuff, the way tan parka sounded like a horoscope for half the city and still mattered when placed beside everything else. On a separate table, the DA's office stacks its language carefully. Probable cause, forensics, statements, consistency. Words that hold if you don't lean too hard. Evan's arrest detaches the neighborhood from its hinges. The foxglove replaces the bulbs over the bar because the light suddenly feels wrong. Regulars measure the distance from their stools to the exit with their eyes. Someone writes Lena's name on a napkin, burns the corner, and says a prayer that doesn't come with instructions. Across town, mothers text daughters with the same sentence in different orders. Be careful tonight. Call me when you get home. Don't cut through the lot. The lot is a bakery. The ovens are back on. On any given dawn, the air there still smells like warm sugar and metal. People inhale it like a cure. Evan's place is a set piece, the bent blind window, the square of carpet worn bald where someone stands and wonders what they forgot. The officers move slow. They put on gloves. They take pictures from low angles because low angles make rooms tell the truth. They find nothing and also everything. A long tan parka folded tight, flattening its history, a lighter and a second lighter and a third, each with a different chain of teeth marks along the chrome. A shoebox labeled wrenches that contains no wrenches. Inside are 4 red plastic caps like the head of a pin, a torn paper with a list of addresses in pencil and the word spares, and a metal shim smooth as a tongue. In the junk drawer, a ring with 3 keys no one can account for. In a coffee can under the sink, a handful of screws that match the hinges on the building's basement doors, heads ground down to make them obstinate. In the bathroom, behind the cleaning supplies, a jar of petroleum jelly with a fingerprint pressed into it turned into a fossil. In his truck, a 2008 with a bed that has never once been empty, they find a black milk crate full of valves and gauges and just one food container with a white label that says CU ER 398. He says it's from a previous job. He says he bought the crate at a yard sale. He says a lot of things that are either too elaborate or not elaborate enough. When they cuff him, his hands lie flat like animals that have learned to play dead without being told. The timeline is a nerve they keep pressing to see if the leg will kick. In 1998, Evan would have been 22. He was in Denver. He worked nights. He moved apartments like he was allergic to leases. He had a parka because everyone did, but his sat strange on the wire hanger, sleeves stiff with some old, invisible storm. He smoked Virginia Slims because he stole them from work, and when men laughed at the name, he smiled a slow, unembarrassed smile that made the laugh die quick. He did maintenance for an insurance office on Franklin. The office with the lobby a janitor vacuumed at 2 in the morning. The one where a small flat key with a red plastic cap fell to the floor, and then to the lost and found hook, and then to nowhere. The detective draws the dot and the line and the dot and the line and the shape that is not yet a confession. They ask him about Lena. He says he doesn't know the name. They ask him about the foxglove. He says he doesn't drink in places that dark. They ask him about the culvert, the scarf. He asks for a lawyer. They offer him coffee on a cardboard tray that sags in the middle like a tired bridge. He lets it cool and then drinks it too fast. The camera on the ceiling watches hot liquid glint in his eyes and refuses to feel anything. And there it is, the old fork in the road, the story that ties in a neat knot and the story that frays until the rope is all stray strands. The headline says, "Solved," but the voice under it says, "Prove it." The lab runs the fibers twice. The algorithm scans the partial print against a database that grew teeth over 27 years. The hit comes back as almost, nearly, let's look again, they do. It leans toward Evan's right index. It wants to be certain. It is not a person. It does not know what certainty costs. They take apart his days like an engine, piece by oil slick piece. Where were you February? Which night? Who saw you? He brings up a name, then loses it. He offers a receipt, then can't find it. He says the ovens at the bakery were out. No one had mentioned the ovens. He shrugs and says he heard it around. He says he knew a girl who cut through lots to get home because she said the alleys were quicker than the sidewalks. He says this without being asked about alleys. He says it like he thinks alleys are a kind of trivia. Someone writes it down the way you write down the exact color of a storm because it could matter later. Renteria walks the old route again, not because it will yield, but because it keeps the shape of the city fresh in the mind. Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to Franklin. He stands at the crosswalk and waits long after the signal changes, letting cars flow past as if he were studying the current to understand where it drags. He remembers Lena's unfinished painting, leaning against a wall that had to listen to the police explain angles. He remembers the letter taped back together. If I leave, it won't be running, it will be choosing. He wonders if anyone has the right to interrogate a sentence. He wonders if we ever know the difference between running and choosing until we're already gone. The community seizes on new rituals. People who never met Lena hang scarves from fence posts, small cloth flags that collect weather and intent. The bakery puts a jar on the counter labeled for Lena. Money sprouts in it, then dwindles, then sprouts again whenever the case returns to the ticker. A podcaster with a voice like smooth gravel calls the story The Girl in the Culvert and gives it music that tries too hard. The episode ends with a cliffhanger because endings are a currency now. Download numbers jet forward like a fever chart. In the comment section, someone writes, "It was the maintenance guy. It's always the maintenance guy." Someone else writes, "It's never the one who's easy to name." Truth sits between them, legs crossed, not choosing sides. Pieces keep arriving like mail that never learned your address. A tenant from a building Evan worked in back then recalls a smell in the basement one March. Not rot, exactly, just the idea of rot. He remembers how Evan propped open the metal door with his boot and whistled like a man without a calendar. He remembers the tan parka hung on a nail, not on a hook, a weird, small act of impatience. He remembers a lighter sparking again and again, the flame refusing to catch, the rhythm almost musical, and then cruel. You could build a case out of memories like these if you wanted to live in a house made of breath. The cuff itch becomes a miniature obsession. A dermatologist watches the press conference and calls in a tip, contact dermatitis, likely nickel, could be from cheap watchbacks, house keys, handcuffs, or more obscure alloys. Renteria writes it down and puts it nowhere for a day, just lets it sit at the edge of his desk like a pet waiting to be named. Then he pulls the old evidence log. The scarf had a tiny discolored patch they couldn't name. Nickel could say it, or it could say nothing. He holds the log the way a priest might hold a hymnal, not for the words, but for the weight. Evan's attorney opens with the usual heat. The evidence is dusty. The chain of custody is a threadbare rope. The city is desperate for closure. The man in the tan parka could be anyone who shopped at Sears. The partial print is a ghost made flesh by a computer with a bias for waking the dead. The DA tightens its jaw and rearranges its papers into a neat danger. The camera pans again, looking for a human face in a room that has decided to be made of angles. And in the quiet, the part no one plans for, a woman calls the tip line and leaves her voice like a fingerprint. She says she once thought she saw Lena, years after 1998, at a rest stop off I-25. Hair shorter, eyes the same, the kind of same that isn't about color, but about the way focus clamps down. She didn't call then, because who calls about a maybe that could also be a wish? Now she calls because the news told her the story was over and something in her refused the period. Renteria listens 3 times. He drives out to the rest stop anyway. The vending machines have been replaced. The tile still wears old gum like fossils. He stands in the echo and understands how a ghost can make a room feel more crowded. They check Evan's old storage unit history, the ledger line that made your ears perk up when the red-capped key first appeared. Units rented, units surrendered, payments late, a note scrawled once. Tenant moved out suddenly, left oil stains, no contents. He looks at the date. It's March 1998. He looks at the address. It's a 10-minute drive from the culvert. He looks at the name on the unit before Evans. It's a woman's. It's a coincidence that rattles in the box with all the other coincidences, and together they make a sound like inevitability. Inside the DA's office, a whiteboard grows a map of words that your eyes want to turn into a picture. Scarf, fibers, print, algo match, P to 0.97, tan parka, red cap keys, bakery ovens out, insurance office, janitor, 2 a.m., storage unit, I-25 rest stop, itch. In the corner, someone wrote Lena in capital letters once and then underlined it 3 times like it was a spell. A bottle of hand sanitizer on the window ledge turns thick in the sun. Nobody touches it. Evan doesn't confess. This is not that story. He tells small lies that look like truth from a distance and big truths that look like lies because they don't fit the room. He says he worked nights because the day made him itch under the skin. He says he never liked the sound a trash bin makes when the lid slams shut. He says he didn't do this thing they're saying he did, this thing with the scarf and the culvert and the overtime of a winter night. He says he remembers a girl once, not Lena, different hair, who smiled at him in a way that made his mouth feel useless. He says that memory is not a crime. He says it like a man in a canoe saying he doesn't understand the river. He says it like a prayer that can't find its God. And outside, the city keeps its own inventory. Crosswalks in need of paint. Cameras that blink and pretend. A bakery that stays open an hour later on Fridays because sugar forgives more than salt. A detective who walks the route again as if repetition could become a staircase to a different floor. He stops at the corner where the liquor store used to be and watches a different neon sign throw a different light. He rolls the red-capped key between thumb and index in his pocket, a habit he doesn't admit to. He thinks about Lena's letter. He wonders what choosing looks like when the street reaches up and steals the rest of your sentence. The voice takes a breath, a long one that tastes of dust and metal and the kind of coffee that never cools. The headline still rolls on the screen. The word solved keeps doing its small, frantic job, but the alley does not agree. The culvert hums a doubt only dogs can hear. The scarf, in its evidence bag, remembers the shape of a neck the way a glove remembers a hand. The story keeps moving because it must. Because stillness is a luxury for stories that don't involve winter and missing and the sound a lighter makes when it refuses to entertain fire. And so we stay with it, with the detective who doesn't stop drawing lines, with the city that wants to believe in stamps and seals and statements, with the man whose parka folds too neatly for what it's seen, and with the memory of a woman whose unfinished painting leans forever against a wall that listens harder than any of us. They wheel the old evidence back under fresh light like relics taken from a chapel for a second opinion, the kind of second opinion that doesn't worry about hurting feelings. The scarf breathes through plastic. The sketchbook from Lena's coat, edge softened by time, opens to a page where pencil ghosts try to stand, a figure half-formed in charcoal, a street lamp tilted like a question. The lab doesn't do poetry. It does counts and peaks and ladders. Still, every machine hum has a note of wanting. Touch DNA, they say, and the phrase sounds like a contradiction, something brushed, something barely there, turned into a signature. The scarf yields more whispers than before. A faint lattice of cells, a mixture that looks like a crowd raising hands. The software makes a choir from it, separates one voice from another until the lead line points toward a man with an index finger that might have tugged at the wool. Might have. Probability becomes a scaffold the prosecutors hang lights on. Defense calls it an illusion, with better fonts. The numbers stay the same. They don't care how you feel about them. Renteria stands behind glass and watches Gelban stair-step toward an answer that doesn't arrive. He isn't fluent in the language of alleles and likelihood ratios. He is fluent in patience. He looks at the chart and sees not bars, but winters. He thinks about the way some nights feel like rooms with the windows painted shut. He thinks about Lena's route like a melody that insists on resolving and never does. He thinks about the word solved and the way it lands like a bird that's guessing at its own wings. They look for the tan parka's provenance because stories like receipts. Did Evan buy it new? No. Thrift store. Did the thrift store keep names? Not in 1998. Did anyone remember him at the counter? The woman who has worked there so long her knuckles look antique says she remembers everybody and nobody. She says the winter of '98 the store smelled like wet dog and dust, and a man bought 3 things that made no sense together: a parka, a lamp base with no shade, and a plastic bread box. She says she remembers because he asked if the bread box seals tight, and she didn't like the shape of the question. She isn't sure that man was Evan. She is sure about the weather. Snow that thick makes memory feel expensive. The lighter habit turns out to be a thread with teeth. A fire investigator, retired now, still suspicious of wire that kinks for no reason, visits the property Evan managed 2 decades ago. He runs his fingers along a line of scorched paint no one else noticed. He says a nervous lighter can melt varnish in a thin smile. He says when you're thinking, you don't notice where the flame leans. He steps into the basement and inhales. The smell of cold metal and damp wood rises up, a veteran's handshake. He says nothing useful and everything true. Elsewhere, a squad raids the storage facility owner's memory like a pantry. The ledger from March 1998 is paper-thin transparency, numbers ghosting through from the page beneath. Evan paid cash, moved out suddenly, oil stains left, no contents. The manager from then is dead now. The assistant manager is very much alive and cranky. He says he remembers the young maintenance guy because the kid whistled like he had an appointment with somewhere else. He says he remembers the tan coat because the kid kept it on even while sweating. Asked why that matters, he shrugs and says people tell on themselves with their coats. He says the unit smelled like winter kept indoors, which is to say both damp and dry. He says he saw a red-capped key on the kid's ring and thought, cheap trick, but it works. A locksmith takes the red-capped key and rolls it like a bead between his fingers. He says the cap's from a bulk pack sold to building supers who want color without spending money. He says the key blade shows microstriations from being bumped into locks that weren't its own. He places it under a microscope, points with a pencil short as a knuckle. See that crescent wear? That's someone trying doors the way gamblers try luck. He pulls a shim like a magician pulls a coin from behind your ear. You can feel the hinge line through a coat if you've done it enough, he says. The body learns the shape of entrances. Evan sits in county under fluorescent noon that never ends. He asks for books with diagrams, air conditioners, plumbing trees, things that show systems and where they break. He doesn't read the crime section. He tells the chaplain he doesn't pray, but he'd like the silence. He folds his hands in the chapel and studies how nails require both force and aim. He says to nobody, I don't like alleys. It's unclear whether he means this as confession or weather report. And because a story refuses to accept only one gravity, something else falls toward it. The delivery driver. Back then, the alley held a delivery truck like a dark tooth. The driver that night filed an incident report. Minor fender scrape, no witnesses, snow. The form slept in a drawer no one thought to open. When they do, the signature shocks a small, half-forgotten bell. Morrow. Not Evan. Arthur, his brother, 10 years older. Moved out of state in 2001. The city doesn't groan. It clicks. Renteria drives that one to the ground. Where he is, who he sees, whether the family shares more than a surname. The brother lives in a desert now, wears sun like a uniform. The phone call is both cordial and clipped. We weren't close, Arthur says, which is a phrase that means the edges were sharp. He was a night person. I wasn't. He says he doesn't remember the scrape. He says that winter all scrapes felt the same. The defense grabs at Arthur like a life ring. Someone else could have had the parka. Someone else could have driven the truck, been near the alley, shed the cells. The DA's jaw tightens until it's a new piece of furniture. Renteria writes the brother's timeline in block letters that refuse flare. He finds a W-2 that places Arthur on shift the week before and the week after, a calendar hole that could fit a myth. He doesn't plug it. He pins it and writes, check again. Meanwhile, the city rehearses safety like lines in a play. Don't walk alone. Don't wear both headphones. Don't be predictable. Be predictable enough that cameras can remember you. People say it all with the bolted-on certainty of advice that came too late. The foxglove bartenders keep 2 flashlights behind the bar now, heavy mag lights that can stun a bad idea. A tiny sign near the register reads, walk in pairs, please, like it's offering a special. No one laughs. A woman steps forward to say she worked with Lena, that she still has a voicemail saved from the week before Lena vanished. The kind you never delete because you believe attention keeps people breathing. The message is quick, an apology for a missed lunch, a promise to make it up with cake on Thursday. The voice is offhand, warm at the edges. Alive, alive, alive. They digitize it and file it next to everything that insists on her being more than a headline. Renteria listens 3 times and doesn't touch the part of himself that breaks and reforms like ice thin under a boot. The culvert returns in dreams, not just to the city, which dreams in gridlines and patrol routes, but to the detective who tries not to dream at all. In sleep, he stands at the ditch's lip and hears water that isn't there. He peers down and sees scarves like river weeds, hands like pale fish. He wakes with the taste of pennies. He goes to work. He writes again on the board. Motive? They try all the motives on and discard them as if shopping for coats in a store with bad lighting. Opportunistic, planned, compulsion. Someone says thrill and the word feels cheap, a label you slap on a box because you ran out of real words. Someone says control and that one sticks a little longer. Maintenance is control, the small empire of knobs and valves, the power to make heat appear, to make light fail, to enter where someone sleeps and leave without leaving. A man who loves locks might love unlocking. A man who keeps spare keys might keep other spares. A man with an itch under his cuff might be trying to quiet a metal that never settled. But the case only moves when evidence moves, not because metaphors agree. so they push on the hinge they have, the algorithmic print match. The lab brings in a second lab because the city has learned not to stand alone when the ground shakes. The second lab doesn't argue, it recalculates. The number inches up, a percentage point like a breath held longer. Someone says that's science for you. Certainty accretes like stalactites. Renteria says nothing. He has seen certainty crumble because everyone wanted to believe. He has also seen it hold when belief withered. A letter arrives addressed to nobody in particular. Inside, a Polaroid of a brick wall with the words "Knock" for Jason reappearing in faded marker as if memory bled through paint. On the back, a date, 2/14/98. The postal mark is recent, the image is not. They track the source to a flea market where a box of old photos was sold for $5 to a man who likes other people's memories. He says he thought the handwriting was romantic in a sad way. He says he saved it because it made his chest hurt. He says the seller found the box in a storage unit clean-out, the same facility with the ledger and the note about oil. The circle tightens not like a noose, but like a camera zoom. Evan's public defender files motions that clatter like pans thrown in a sink. Suppress the key, suppress the scarf, suppress the algorithm unless the code is disclosed. The judge's eyebrows knit a sweater that says maybe on Mondays, no on Thursdays. The courtroom fills with the slow dance of procedure. Outside, a protester holds a sign that reads, "We want truth," as if it were on tap and the only failure was will. Inside, the DA prepares a grand jury presentation that turns scatter into sequence, a timeline like train tracks, a chain of custody ironed crisp, a voiceover in their own heads, stern and precise, the scarf, the lighter, the parka, the key, the culvert, the itch. Renteria goes back to the liquor store location and finds it reborn as a smoothie place with a mural of fruit that looks indecently happy. He stands on the sidewalk where the clerk once made a cigarette brand into a Greek chorus. He closes his eyes and listens for the door chime that doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes place remembers better than people. He puts his hand flat to the brick and feels heat from the afternoon and, beneath it, a colder memory that isn't the weather. He doesn't call it anything. He lets it be a sensation without a noun. The podcast drops a second episode with an update tone brighter than it should be. It says the word algorithm like it's a superhero. It drags the storage unit into the spotlight and points to the ledger like a smoking gun. A law professor calls in to complicate the melody, sings a counter harmony about probabilities and priors. The audience splits into those who want more numbers and those who want fewer. The comment that gets the most hearts reads, "Solving doesn't mean knowing." The second most liked, "He did it. You can feel it." Nobody hearts Renteria's private thought. Feeling is the easiest lie. Then a real hinge. The sketchbook yields a second life. Under Lena's charcoal figure, the street lamp question, conservators find an older sketch pressed by heavy hand. A door with a peculiar hinge plate, 2 screws shaved to near nothing. A note in the margin. Why does this rattle? The hinge plate style is uncommon, the kind ordered in bulk by a particular contractor who serviced 3 buildings in the late 90s, one of them the insurance office on Franklin. The contractor's records survive because a bored nephew digitized them during a summer internship. Evan signed for deliveries twice. He initialed a return once. The door rattled because someone wanted it to. Renteria holds the page up and the charcoal dust lifts like winter breath. They knock on the contractor's door in a different city. The owner's daughter answers, the one who boxed the past by color and kept the key. She remembers Evan as the kid with the quiet boots, the one who always offered to carry more than he should. She doesn't remember him talking. She remembers the way he studied exit devices like they were biographies. She says the shaved screws were her father's shortcut, a bad habit born from worse margins. She says anyone could have done the rattle. She says the difference between structural and cosmetic is how soon you plan to leave. Back at County, Evan asks for more diagrams. He draws in the margins, circles, arrows, a culvert that could be a tunnel or a throat. When a guard says he's good at it, Evan smiles like a man who had to teach himself where everything goes. The chaplain asks if he's sorry for anything. He says sure and leaves it lying there like a tool on a bench. He says he should have moved farther sooner. He says he should have bought better gloves. He says gloves tear. The chaplain waits for him to aim those words. He doesn't. The air between them fills with the sound of lighters that don't catch. The grand jury convenes on a Wednesday so blue the sky feels painted. Witnesses sit under oath and tell the truth as it fits in their mouths. The thrift clerk with the weather memory, the assistant manager with the coat philosophy, the locksmith with his crescent wear, the woman with the voicemail that refuses to die. the dermatologist with the nickel itch. They all carry their small torches into a room that was lit before they arrived and will be lit after. The DA strings them like beads. The jury listens like granite. No confession then, no epiphany that cracks the air. Instead, accretion, fibers that agree with other fibers, prints that prefer one finger to another, a parka that lines up with a description like a shadow deciding to be honest, a key that fits too many doors, a city that does not forget how it felt to learn a winter could swallow a person and hold them out of sight for 27 years. And still, the rest stop woman doesn't go away. She stands in Renteria's mind like a street sign that insists on pointing left. He drives there again. Because compulsion and duty often wear the same coat. He walks the tiled bathroom. He stands where a camera might have been if anyone had thought to point one then. He looks at the vending machines and thinks of the foxglove cash jar, the one that blooms money when hope does and withers when fatigue wins. He watches a mother hold a daughter's hand until the girl shakes it off because she is 15 and immortal. He notices a maintenance man wheeling a cart of supplies with the ease of someone who has learned all the shortcuts. The man's keys jingle, bright silver, no red caps. Renteria's shoulders loosen by an inch. Then he tightens them again because relief is a trap. Night comes on like a witness who wants to help and can't. The alley is the alley again, and the culvert sings that subsonic dog song, and the scarf in its bag curls into the memory of a neck. The city tries on the word solved in its sleep and finds it alternately too loose and too tight. The headline keeps doing laps. The voice keeps moving with it, not to lead, not to follow, but to stay inside the current where truth drifts and snags and sometimes surfaces with a sound like a gasp. We stay with the hum of the fluorescence and the clatter of keys and the low, patient scratch of a pencil across a sketchbook page that outlived its artist and still manages to witness. We stay because not staying is a way of letting the winter win. And if there is one thing Denver's learned to be stubborn about, it's what it refuses to give back to the cold. The grand jury's Wednesday dissolves into Thursday like ink run under a tap, and nothing breaks, nothing bursts. It just keeps carrying forward, a steady drift that unnerves the people who were promised a thunderclap. Renteria leaves the courthouse and feels the city look at him through its panes. Bus windows, restaurant glass, apartment eyes stacked in gridded rows, waiting to read his face for the verdict he cannot give. The air is thin, clean in that Colorado way that makes everyone think they're breathing the truth. He gets into his car and sits without turning the key, letting the silence arrange its furniture. In the glove compartment, a spiral notebook, edges chewed by years. He writes one word on a fresh page in block letters that will not lean: Jason. Because paint is petty, it never forgets what it once covered. The Polaroid's handwriting looked like a dare, not a direction. Knock for Jason. The alley had worn it once, the brick remembers. Names like that do not arrive from nowhere. They're called down like weather. Renteria makes a list of Jasons until the page looks like a phone book for a city with only one first name. Jason with the band at the Foxglove. Jason who fixed pinball machines. Jason who sold second-hand lamps from a storage unit and disappeared after a landlord war. Jason whose last name keeps changing depending on who misses him. If someone wanted to whisper a passphrase into the brick, they could do worse. Knock for Jason, and a door opens. Knock for Jason, and the rattle stops. He takes the long way back to the precinct because habit is an enemy and a friend. Colfax hums its nightly hymn. Neon adjectives lean on nouns. The Foxglove throws a strip of purple onto the sidewalk like it's trying to flag down the past. Inside, a bartender polishes empty with surgical intent. She remembers Lena, but in that wide way memory sometimes does. Posture and laughter and the way she said the word late, drawing it out like taffy. She hands over a bar ledger from '98 that someone had the mercy to keep. On February nights there are small marks, an X by a name, a heart by another, little symbols that bartenders use when paperwork must be human. Beside Lena's closeout, a small square. What's that? Renteria asks, finger above the page but not touching. Walkout watch, she says. Someone said they'd walk her. She said no. Square means offer refused, a geometry of danger, drawn after the fact. Next door, the bakery's ovens, those fickle gods, are running now, loud, perfumed, implacable. The current owner shrugs with the weariness of someone who inherited both recipes and ghosts. Ovens were down that week, back then, he says, catching the date on Renteria's badge like it's contagious. He pulls a file from beneath a cash drawer the size of a cradle. Receipts in thermal ink that has tried very hard to escape. A technician's handwriting, masculine, impatient. Power relay fried, replaced. Date 2/13/98. Time 22:47. He points. We closed early. Cold air in there, not warm. The story edits itself. The route changes shape. The excuse of heat evaporates. Lena didn't pass for comfort. She passed for time, for habit, for the unremarkable truth that people do not plan to be missing. Renteria walks the back corridor anyway. He reads the wall. Deliveries, instructions, comedy from bored dishwashers. In the corner where the mop bucket sulked for decades, the paint lifts in thin, curling tongues, revealing strata, old shades of yellow, older whites, and then brick, the original text. He leans in where a rectangle is a shade cleaner, like a sign once hung there and learned to leave. Off-center, under dust, faint dots from grease, the kind that prints through poster board. He imagines paper tacked up. Knock for Jason, a note that drifted, got pulled, then pushed one alley down, where it became rumor, and then a dare on a wall that didn't deserve it. He asked for the file on the insurance office again. In '98, the office's night shift janitor vacuumed a lobby and found a red-capped key. He hooked it. It vanished. He moves now like a man on ice who trusts his skates. He repeats the steps, reads the old statements until the words no longer have flavor. The janitor is retired to a trailer park 1 county over where wind insists on speaking. The man's hearing has thickened with age, but memory, when it wants to be charitable, refuses to die. "I remember the key," he says before Renteria asks. "Red cap like a candy." He remembers the kid in maintenance who could take apart a door without blinking. He remembers the door on the east stairwell that rattled like it had secrets behind it. He remembers this fun fact. Someone complained that winter about cold air sneaking up from the basement. Like the building had learned to exhale, the janitor says, and laughs in a way that has no joy assigned to it. Basements are patient. The insurance buildings is now a co-working space where ambition grows under fluorescent light and free coffee. The stairwell no longer rattles. The screws are honest now. But fidelity to the past exists in quiet corners. A spalled concrete lip, a scuff that snuck past the renovation budget, a rust blossom like a bruise. Renteria stands where the cold would have migrated from. He closes his eyes and asks the building a question without using words. Then he uses words anyway. Where do you lead when you're tired of being a building? He hears nothing. This is not a story where walls talk. And yet the air moves with purpose toward an old fire door whose replacement is too perfect, too new for its surroundings. He presses the push bar. It refuses. Alarm wired, sign posted. He pictures another hand pressing in 98, no alarm. A quick exit to an alley that believed itself neutral. Evidence doesn't love romance, it loves sequence, so the lab squeezes the scarf a bit harder, tests for residues the first pass considered noise. A smear sings nickel again, a metallic whisper caught in a wool forest. They check Evan's life for nickel, keys, watchbacks, parts. He swims in the stuff. A defense attorney will say half the city does. They're not wrong, but geometry helps. Nickel on scarf, nickel under cuff, and itch, a lighter sparked in rhythms that matched nervousness, not function. A human body can become an instrument. The song it plays is habit. A city maintenance request from 98 floats up like a message in a bottle. Streetlight out at Ogden and 13th, the corner where Lena peeled away from sight. The bulb was replaced 2 days later. The work order includes an old map grid reference and the signature of a tech who swears he remembers nothing beyond the way the wind smoked his breath. But the work order has a note boxed out. Fixture lens cracked, edges sharp. Renteria follows that shard to the depot, where someone saved a lens because they wanted to show a supervisor what not to do when you tighten a bracket with hands numb from cold. He holds the glass in his gloved palm, turns it to the light, and there, a smear embedded in the spidered edge, the resin of a sticker long since peeled. He sends it downtown. The lab purrs and says, adhesive backbone consistent with those red keycaps, trace plasticizer present, not a match, not a miracle, a proximity, the universe side-eyeing coincidence. Meanwhile, the rest stop refuses to pack up and leave the detective's desk. The call sits like a stone he cannot pocket or discard. It aches with possibility and insult. If you saw her, what then? If you didn't, why does the thought hum like a transformer? He calls the highway patrol anyway. Asks for any incident that month, that year. Women, missing, found, neither. He maps the data with the patience of a man counting rings in a tree. A pattern nearly appears, then falls apart, like frost melting into original water. A trooper, now retired, remembers writing a ticket for a truck idling too long, the kind with a crate collection built into its bed. The guy apologized before I got to the window, the trooper says. No one apologizes that quick. He offers a plate number with 2 digits missing and a letter he can't swear to. Renteria writes it down anyway because the case has taught him reverence for almosts. Evan's brother Arthur sends a letter through counsel. Leave me out of your story. It's not cruelty, it's exhaustion. He signs it with a fountain pen. The ink pools in the M like a small lake. Renteria studies the curve of the hand, purely to keep his own from fixing a person to a roll. He looks up Arthur's route logs. The delivery scrape wasn't that night. It was a week later. Snow again, a different alley. Proximity does not equal guilt. He repeats this like a catechism, not because he doubts it, but because the world does. He calls Arthur anyway and asks about lighters. I quit, Arthur says. 20 years. He asks about coats. I like vests, Arthur says. Arms free. The kid liked sleeves. The word kid lands soft and dull. The way you talk about someone you can no longer reach without cutting your own hand. Prosecutors prefer straight lines, but juries understand texture, so the DA's team collects textures like a museum of touch, the way the parka's cuffs hold faint grooves from where a lighter's wheel would grind when flicked and flicked and flicked, the way the red keycaps in Evan's shoebox bear tooth scars not from keys but from being bitten while both hands were busy, the way the storage unit ledger trembles its ghost numbers across to the next page, the way the sketchbook paper thins where a heavy hand has leaned to draw, door, hinge, note. Why does this rattle? The way the voicemail refuses to die and insists on reminding strangers that a voice can be an artifact. They pull the old corner camera footage again, software that didn't exist then now coaxing pixels like stubborn children. Grain ascends to grit, grit to shapes. A vehicle passes with a tail light that blinks too fast, a relay going bad. In the lower left corner, 4 frames of a sleeve with a seam that runs not along the underarm but high. A distinctive cut of an out-of-date brand the thrift clerk insists she used to price by the rack. They find an ad in a 1997 circular, the kind of detail that feels absurd and necessary simultaneously. No one builds a case from sleeves, everyone builds a case from sleeves plus 17 other things. And Jason. The name goes nowhere until it abruptly collides with a contractor's work ticket from December 97, holiday lockout called J-Temp Access Only, initialed EM. The tenant on that ticket? A short-term office share used by a band manager whose first name, on renegotiated contracts and bar napkin deals, is always Jason. A man who moved months later, owing 2 weeks and 3 apologies. He floats through statements like a cigarette in a gutter, briefly visible, then gone around a corner. Knock for Jason could be instruction or inside joke or both. The point is the door. Who knocked? Who answered? How many doors did a young maintenance tech learn from a man who lived on late entrances and back exits? Evan sits under the Nevernight and sketches. He draws Lena as a negative space. Alley, streetlight, coat, all implied by what isn't there. He doesn't sign it. The CO says he's talented. Evan says talent is what people call it when you learn slow and refuse to stop. He asks, almost polite, if they have any diagrams of older culvert gates, the kind with manual locks. The guard says no and doesn't ask why. The chaplain asks again if there's anything he wants to say to anyone. Evan asks, "Does anyone want to hear from me?" The chaplain says yes, and it isn't a lie, and it isn't quite true. Night, Renteria goes back to the culvert. He cannot help it. He brings a flashlight heavy enough to be a statement. He thumbs the switch on, and the concrete throat clarifies into ribs, into echoes, into resistance. He climbs down the embankment slowly, like a man visiting a grave that hasn't admitted itself. He shines the light along the lip where roots claw in. He sees nothing new, then something not new at all. A rust stain he has filed and filed and filed in his head, the color of day-old blood, now blooming outward, more elaborate, like time has given it permission to decorate. The shape suggests metal left and taken long ago. He imagines a tool there, a hook, a loop. He imagines hands. He places his palm against the cold, flat place where he believes it was. He takes it away. His skin crawls, a nickel itch in a man who never wore watches. A wind comes up the ditch and combs his coat. He looks toward the street where a car idles with music too soft to identify. He looks up at the stars that never help. He says Lena's name out loud because names are anchors and also kites. They tie and they lift. He pictures the way her letter read, "I will not run, I will choose," and wonders how many choices make up an evening that ends with an alley and a parka sleeve passing through a camera's indifferent eye. The lab calls him the next morning before coffee puts bones back into his head. They ran the scarf adhesive smear against the streetlight lens's tracer. Profile congruent, they say. Not a fingerprint, but a rhyme. He writes rhyme on the board because sometimes plain words need to feel seen. The DA nods like someone remembering an old lullaby. The defense will argue contamination. The city will listen with the kind of politeness that masks impatience. He calls the thrift clerk and thanks her for remembering the weather. He calls the janitor and thanks him for the phrase about buildings exhaling. He calls the woman with the voicemail and thanks her for never hitting delete. Gratitude is not evidence. It's armor for days when truth refuses to carry its own weight. And Jason, another call, another dead hallway. The band manager is 2 names removed now, a handshake that never made it to paper. He lives in a coastal town where fog stabs inland like knives blunt with use. When Renteria reaches him, the man laughs and then regrets it. Knock for Jason, he says, like he's tasting an old song. That was because I jammed the buzzer. Stupid prank. You had to knock. I moved before I got fined. Did he know Evan? He was a shadow. Every venue has one. Opens everything, fixes everything. Say thanks and keep your guard up. Did he hear about the girl? Everyone did, he says. We were all scared. Some of us weren't scared enough to change. The DA locks in the calendar. Arraignment motions. A trial season if it comes, with weather forecasts already arguing with themselves. The podcast drafts an episode description that ends with a question mark big enough to drive trucks through. The foxglove polishes glass. The bakery sets out a jar that no longer has a label because everyone knows what the jar is for. The city tries again to wear the word solved in a size that fits both its hope and its doubt. The voice does not condescend. It does not soothe. It keeps pace, a half step behind the evidence, a half step ahead of forgetting, narrating what it can stand to say. The parka and the lighter, the nickel and the key, the culvert and the lens, the knock and the name that might be a joke, might be a command. It moves the way February moves toward March, not gentler, just different, insisting that thaw and truth are never the same thing, and sometimes you must learn to live with one while you wait for the other to show its face. The arraignment arrives like weather. You can smell hours before the first drop. The courthouse air goes electric. Microphones bloom on tripods like fast flowers. And the word solved shines too bright under noon, as if it were polished by hands that needed to stay busy. Evan comes up in county orange, the color of warning signs. He holds himself tidy, a man who still believes in square corners. His attorney leans in, murmurs, arranges the visible theater, chin angle, gaze neutral, the little pantomimes of innocence that jurors fantasize they can read. The charge is read. It doesn't echo. Some rooms eat sound. He pleads not guilty in a voice that belongs to a maintenance order, firm, short, functional. Lena's mother sits 3 rows back, hands clasped so hard her knuckles are topographic maps. Time has carved her into a shape that casts a long, complicated shadow. People want her to be a symbol. She wants the afternoon to give her back 1 minute from 1998 and then leave her alone. When the judge says bail, when the DA says flight risk, when the defense says community ties, the mother stares at the table edge and breathes like someone who taught herself to swim because drowning took too long. The cameras ask Renteria for posture, not quotes. He gives them the angle of a man who will not be asked to smile. The DA gives them sentences shaved of adjectives. The defense gives them a verdict preview. Shaky science, old evidence, bias hunting a man who works with his hands because a narrative needs a villain with pockets to search. The city takes all this in like weather again. Umbrellas up, windows down, everyone pretending they can predict the next hour from the first 5 drops. Procedure claims the week. Motions arrive tied with ribbon that only lawyers can unwrap without slicing their fingers. The code of the algorithm becomes a character in the story, sworn in by proxy. Show it, says the defense, or your magic trick is a rumor. The lab says proprietary like a shield. The judge says produce enough for a fair fight. Everyone pretends fairness isn't a costume we hem to fit the room. Behind the pageant, quieter threads pull taut. The sketchbook again. Because paper remembers pressure deeper than ink. A conservator with breath like a flute runs graphite powder across Lena's door drawing, not to darken, but to lift. In the margin, a faint indentation not from her hand, an angle, like something hard pressed beneath the page at some earlier hour, the aluminum edge of a maintenance order pad, the template's ghost. They superimpose an archival blank from the insurance office onto the impression. The boxes line up. In the lower right corner where a text signs, the letter shapes leave a familiar posture. Not a signature, a habit, the flourish of an M that forgets to finish, a straight E without middle. It refuses to become evidence. It insists on being a nudge. Still, the DA circles it like a hawk learning thermals. In a different drawer, forgotten for years because it was labeled with a word no one likes. Miscellaneous. There's a roll of 35mm film from the Alley camera, shot by a crime tech with a stubborn love for analog. They digitize it and get nothing new until the 23rd frame where the camera accidentally caught reflection off a van's side panel. Reflection is a liar and a truth-teller both. The panel shows a warbled slice of scene, a sleeve, a hand, a flick of light near the wrist. But the real gift isn't the arm, it's the tiny rectangle distortions catch and make visible. A sticker with a barcode and the micro-printed vendor abbreviation, QR, the same initials written on the crate in Evan's truck. The same shorthand the unit manager used in March for Cully's equipment rental, the single business that provided culvert gate keys to the city before the model changed. Renteria leans forward like a man who just heard his name whispered by an empty room. The rental shop closed in 2004. The owner died with his own keys under his bed. His son, who keeps the sign in a garage for sentimental reasons, brings out a banker's box labeled Invoices 9699. Paper yields a contract. The city's name sits there, boring in its bureaucratic permanence. Below, sign-outs to trusted contractors authorized to access drainage infrastructure when called, initials. The letters EM appear twice in 1998. The same week, Lena vanished. The defense will say shared login, sloppy lending, bad oversight. The DA will say coincidence, asking to be patted on the head and told it's destiny. Evan studies diagrams. He makes notes in block print that could be a blueprint's cousin. He writes numbers that arrange themselves into distances. Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to the culvert. His attorney calls the notes therapeutic. The CO calls them weird and shrugs. The chaplain says nothing and turns another page of psalms because sometimes the old grief songs are the only ones that know how to sing to a room without windows. A small eruption, a former tenant from the Franklin building, older now, unpersuaded by time, comes forward holding a plastic bread box with a crack in the lid. "He sold me this," she says, showing a seller's name scrawled on masking tape. "Evan, $2. The thrift store bit returns like a chorus, remember? Parka, lamp base, bread box." Her memory makes a triangle nobody ordered. Store, seller, buyer. She bought because he said it sealed tight. She never used it. She couldn't explain why. "It just felt wrong to trap anything inside it," she says, and the sentence is both absurd and perfect. The defense hates triangles. They round them until they roll away. They file a motion to exclude algorithmic certainty above a number they call garish. They seek to suppress the story of the rest stop because the justice system cannot metabolize maybes without getting a rash. They request to sever any mention of Jason because rumor doesn't deserve a seat. The judge agrees with some, not all. Jason stays for now, not as a man, but as a knock. The bench says, context is not a crime. The prosecutor writes that phrase in his legal pad like a charm he'll wear to court. Outside, the podcast drops another installment with a trumpet intro and a title that should apologize for itself. A criminologist weighs in. The problem with cold cases isn't the cold, it's the heat later. Everyone wants a bonfire. You get embers in a breeze. The host says the algorithm number out loud like an incantation. The comments behave like a jury with no rules. Burn him, free him, it's both, it's neither, it's the city's fault, it's winter's fault, it's men, it's nights, it's locks that never should have been easy. No one blames doors. Doors never argue back. The Foxglove keeps its jar out even though no one really knows what money is supposed to do against the past. People drop bills anyway because offerings are older than law. On a Tuesday, a man leaves a lighter instead of cash. It's chewed, the chrome gnawed, the wheel stiff. The bartender doesn't call it in. She places it behind the register, a small private relic. On Friday, a woman slides a scarf onto the back of a bar stool. Not plum, not bruise, bright red, almost comic in its confidence. She drinks water and leaves. The bartender ties the scarf to a hook by the door like a flag that refuses to lower. Renteria finds the city engineer who remembers the culvert gate the way a veteran remembers the weight of a rifle. The engineer is retired now to a cabin that insists on being quiet. He draws the gate on a napkin, narrow slats, a lockbox like a jaw. "Back then, you could override by loosening the dog," he says, eyes on the line he's making. "Bad design. Good for emergencies. Good for people who wanted to pretend everything was an emergency." He taps the drawn lock. "We changed it after 99. Too many stories like yours," he says. Meaning not solved, meaning not over, meaning this city is built on revisions. There's a lull in the machine. It always happens after the first loud week. The list shrinks to tasks that feel like sweeping a warehouse with a toothbrush. Confirm the vendor abbreviation. Subpoena the contractor's summer intern for a statement that will go nowhere except on a shelf labeled thorough. Retest the scarf under a different protocol because science bows neither to fatigue nor to headlines. Call the thrift clerk again just to hear her weather. Call the janitor again just to hear his building exhale. Drive the route at the hour when Lena walked it, not because the city is the same, but because the body needs to recalibrate its sense of time to that particular dark. He drives. Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to Franklin. The crosswalk remembers its own complaints. The replacement lens throws light like water. A bus grumbles past with two passengers staring into phones that promise worlds with no alleys. A runner cuts across against the light, a hat pulled low against cold that bites more out of habit than necessity. At the corner where the liquor store became Smoothies, Renteria parks and steps out. The brick is still brick no matter what murals try to teach it. He waits for nothing in particular. He hears a lighter flick in an echo chamber of memory. It's only a kid across the street with a vape that hisses like a tire. He lets his shoulders drop one more inch. He hasn't noticed how high they live anymore. At the precinct, a message waits in his voicemail after hours. The voice is low, male, practiced at lying only to itself. "You're looking at keys," it says. "You're looking at locks. Look at hinges. People don't think about hinges. The call came from a payphone that should not exist. They find it anyway, in a laundromat that eats quarters by the pound. The owner says anyone can use it if they need to stand still while machines turn. Renteria stands with his back to a washer that thumps like a failing heart. He studies the public phone with the tenderness you save for old dogs and dangerous bridges. He lifts the receiver. There's only the sound of a line remembering how to work. Hinges. The word slides into the file and rearranges the furniture. Hinge wear patterns. Hinge pin substitution. A hinge pin pulled climbs out like a tooth and leaves an open mouth. Maintenance logs in 98 show a note, the kind of note nobody reads because it's too uninteresting to be suspicious. Stair door hinges lubricated. The date is 2/12/98. The tech initials EM. The product listed, petroleum jelly. Renteria remembers the jar in Evan's apartment, the one with the fingerprint fossil. He remembers the locksmith's laugh. The body learns the shape of entrances. He writes hinges in letters so hard the pen tip wants to split. Suddenly the corridor map shifts. Doors that didn't deserve attention turn into throats. The east stairwell becomes not a hallway accessory, but a route designed by a man who believed in the logic of hardware. The DA's office hums late. The whiteboard acquires a new axis. Locks, hinges, under hinges, jar, stairwell, sketchbook indentation, contractor shortcut shaved screws, door that rattled on purpose, under locks, red caps, adhesive on scarf, streetlight lens rhyme, rental authorization, culvert gate. Between them, a line you could string yarn along if you were the kind to trust yarn. They aren't. They trust repetition in the way it composes its own sentence over time. Evan sleeps or pretends to. In dreams, he isn't the man in the parka. He is a sleeve with no arm in it. He is a key without a bite pattern. He is a hinge pin warmed by human fingers and set aside to cool. He wakes with his hand tingling, a ghost itch. He asks for a pen. The guard says no. He asks for paper. The guard says no. He closes his eyes and draws anyway, eyelid to palm, a slow imaginary line. Lena's mother waters the plants that forgave neglect. They bloom anyway because mercy is older than courts. She opens a shoebox where she keeps the sound she cannot let go of, the voicemail. She plays it once for the room to remind it how to hold a voice. Then she closes the lid because some rituals end themselves. She sits at the table and smooths a napkin and writes the name of the detective because sometimes gratitude needs ink to feel real. She writes, "Thank you for not treating my child like evidence." She doesn't send it. She folds it into the shoebox and says goodnight to a story that refuses to stop talking. And the city, always the city, learns new language for its fear. Not alleys alone, but stairwells that cough in winter, doors that rattle from shaved screws, hinges that tell you how someone planned to leave. People buy better deadbolts and forget hinges entirely because that's the way of things. We armor the obvious and leave the quiet truths bare. The voice keeps moving along the road between obvious and quiet, keeping pace with steps we can't take back, hands that learned the shape of entrances, and a winter night that still won't admit how easy it was to convince everyone it would last forever. The word solved remains a banner hung at the end of a parade that hasn't arrived. The drums are coming, you can feel it in the sidewalk. Or maybe that's only the city exhaling again, that old rattling stairwell breath, reminding us that a building is a body and every body, sooner or later, tells on itself. The hinge is the first honest thing in the room. Metal tells you what it suffered if you listen with the right instruments. The lab borrows a microscope from a university because the city's own eyes feel tired. Under glass, the stairwell hinge pin bears tiny parallel striations like a topography of impatience, the kind made when pliers bite and twist, lubricated with something that dulls the sound. They swab the hinge's pocket where the pin once lived and find the ghost of petroleum jelly mixed with old dust and the iron sigh of age. They run the spectrometer like a priest rubbing beads. The profile leans toward the jar found behind Evan's cleaning supplies, a brand discontinued in 2004, with a trace preservative that aged into a chemical accent, not a fingerprint, a flavor. The DA circles the result and writes the word taste in the corner because science sometimes feels like cooking done by silent saints. Renteria takes the call from the lab and doesn't stand up. He looks at the whiteboard with its axes and lines and feels the board look back. Hinges become verbs now. You can hinge a door, you can hinge a night, you can hinge a life on the small, quiet parts no one checks because locks make louder promises. He thinks about the alley and the stairwell and the lobby that once leaked cold like a breath through chattering teeth. He thinks about a hand that practiced biting a hinge pin with pliers until the metal could be coaxed out the instant the night needed to open. He thinks about a scarf that learned the shape of a stranger's knuckles and kept quiet for decades. He thinks, not for the first time, that violence often arrives disguised as maintenance. The judge allows the hinge evidence to join the party after the DA swears on paper that chain of custody will not embarrass anyone. The defense calls it theatrics built on rust. The judge says rust can be dramatic. The courtroom smiles in its throat and then stops, remembering itself. Outside, the day goes gold for 10 minutes and every window becomes a flare. The foxglove lights theirs early because early feels safe. People enter in pairs and sit in rows like congregants. The bartender touches the red scarf by the door when the bell chimes, not for luck, not for grief, but because ritual is a way to stay the size of your own body. A man from the building's past drops off a box like a confession he can't translate. He used to work as night security at the insurance office, he says, back before he realized fear was a poor employer. In the box, 3 logbooks, a coffee mug with a crack like lightning, and a Polaroid where the east stairwell door is propped open with a rubber wedge the size of a fist. On the wedge, a smear of gray from metal rubbing, and a thumbprint fossilized in dirt. They won't get DNA, they'll get shape. The shape is oval, average, human, nothing. Still, the logbooks hum with the low-voltage truth of repetition. In February 98, entries stutter. Door alarm false at 0142, east stairwell. Door secure 0149. Door alarm false 0211. Door secure 0214. The pattern is the point. False alarms aren't false if someone trained the hinge to tremble and stop, the building learning to exhale on cue. The city engineer drives in from his cabin with the napkin sketch folded into his wallet like a saint card. He looks at the logbook and nods a tired yes. He says softly, "That's someone rehearsing." The word rehearsal hangs between them with the weight of a fact that doesn't care if you like it. Evan's lawyer moves to sever, to stall, to sand. He files a brief that calls the city's story a collage made from scraps no one would save if there were anything better to hang on the wall. He points at the algorithm again. He asks for its childhood, its teachers, its sins. The lab hands over more documentation than anyone wants to read. The defense hires a statistician who wears a suit that fits like a hard rule. He says numbers are honest until people use them. He's right, he's also wrong. The judge sets a hearing and puts a clock on the wall big enough to be threatening. The clock ticks and the day obeys. And then, a voice that forgot to speak finds its tongue. The thrift store clerk calls Renteria a third time, this time to tell him about a drawer she hadn't meant to open. She was moving a stack of old pricing cards when a single tag fluttered out, the kind from a handheld gun that makes tiny plastic tees. The tag still had a bit of its thread attached. On it, Parka, $18, new label stitch. The date, written lazy, 2/9/98. We sometimes stitched replacement brand labels if the original was damaged, she says, embarrassed by a practice that towns learn to tolerate when winter and margins go years together. We used dental floss, cheaper, stronger. She laughs like the punchline might forgive her. The lab swabs the parka cuff. It finds microscopic nylon cross-sections consistent with floss. A dentistry professor confirms with the kind of delight only experts show when their niche becomes a plot twist. They trace the floss brand by its dye signature to 2 suppliers. One sold bulk to charity stores within 20 miles. The DA underlines the sequence. Thrift intake, relabel repair, sale, cuff floss fibers, cuff lighter grooves, cuff nickel itch. The story isn't neat, it is nearer. Near is what you get. The laundromat payphone speaks again. The owner calls this time. Someone left a note tucked behind the phone, a receipt for a money order to Cully's equipment rental, paid in cash, amount small, date long ago. The name in the purchaser line is Halftorn. E. The owner says he started to throw it away because any scrap under that phone is usually gum wrappers and magazines trying to become lint. He kept it because the paper felt serious. Renteria drives over with the patience of a man who knows not to sprint after the thing already moving away. The receipt is real. The stub perforations are specific. The ink has aged into a brown that smells faintly of heat. The amount matches the fee for a lost gate key deposit in '98. You lose the key, you pay, you sign. Could someone else have signed? Of course. Could someone else have put the note behind the phone? Absolutely. The case is a museum of other hands. Renteria files it anyway. Another almost with edges sharp enough to cut your thumb if you press too hard. Lena's friend, the one with the saved voicemail, comes in with something that rattled loose in her sleep. A memory she hated at the time and therefore pushed away. The night before the night, an argument near the Foxglove's back door between a landlord and a tenant from a building on Franklin. Words about overtime, about unauthorized entries, about you can't keep a master. She remembers a man with quiet boots standing a few feet back, not interfering, not indifferent. He had a parka folded over his arm even though the cold would have welcomed sleeves. He looked like he didn't want the coat to learn anything, she says, and the sentence fits somewhere none of them can reach right away. The DA builds a rehearsal sequence in their head and then on paper. Hinge manipulation on the 12th. Culvert authorization sign out the 13th. Ovens fail the 13th. No warm shortcut. Street light lens cracked sometime between. On the 14th, a corridor of planned silence. Hinge pin loosened, door trained, building exhale, stairwell breath, alley mouth, culvert jaw. They don't present it yet. They live with it a day to see if it starts to leak. It doesn't. It hums like something that knows its own parts. The defense counters with a man who writes about wrongful convictions. He reminds the city of tunnels it has fallen into, pattern bias, confirmation bias, CSI glow in rooms that never had it. He says everyone loves a maintenance villain because it's tidy and cruel. The reporter writes the phrase tidy and cruel down like it might be the title of a book later. The DA tightens the presentation, sands out words that sound like feelings and replaces them with measurements. Millimeters of hinge wear, spectral peaks of petroleum, alloy ratios of nickel in cheap watch backs versus commercial key blanks, adhesive backbones of cap plastic compared to streetlight lens trace. The story becomes geometry again. Juries are better at geometry than they admit. Renteria drives to the storage facility not because he expects to find anything the 10th time around, but because language changes shape when you say it where it happened. He stands in front of the unit that was Evan's unit once and listens to the electric hum of a light that wants a new ballast. He runs his fingers over the roll-up door's corrugated ribs and counts dents like charms. In the office, the assistant manager who remembers coats sits under a wall clock that is always 4 minutes fast. He points at the clock like a hymnal cue. He liked to be early, he says of the kid Evan was. He said late makes you loud. Renteria writes it down because sometimes sentences collar other sentences and keep them from running away. A winter storm advisory appears in the news for later in the week as if the weather wanted to audition for the archive. Grocery shelves empty in ways that never stop being funny when the snow is 5 inches and your city has trucks. People talk about 1998 like it happened at breakfast. They say they remember the exact feel of that cold, the way sound turned angular. They do, they don't. Memory is a mirror. It always tells you what it thinks you need. The voice in our ear keeps a different promise. It will not sand the edges. It will not crown anyone with the word closure and call it a coronation. In County, Evan gets a visit from a man no one recognizes until he speaks. The voice has the old stage in it. The band manager, Jason, not Jason. He asked to see the defendant. The court allowed it because it would look worse to refuse. He sits on the other side of thick glass and smirks like a habit he refused to quit. You always wanted the back door, he tells Evan. Evan says nothing. You like knowing where the exits were. Evan tilts his head like a man listening to a duck sing. Jason laughs and taps the glass with a ring that looks like it owes someone money. They painted me on a wall for a year, you know. Knock for me. As if I owed anyone entry. He leans close. You didn't do this thing, he says. A sentence that lands neither helpful nor cruel, simply wrong-sounding in the mouth that chooses it. Evan finally speaks. If I wanted to leave, I left, he says. A mantra, a mechanic's sermon. The CO ends the visit because the room feels like it's getting smaller. The snow arrives indecisive and then committed. The city exhales the way buildings do. The stairwells remember that breath. Renteria walks the alley one more time because snow remakes the ground into paper and feet write on it whether they mean to or not. He looks for nothing and finds it. He looks for something and finds a pattern of slick near the brick where knock for Jason once pretended to be a spell. The slick is old gum, old grease, old city. He smiles without humor. He bends, scoops up a handful of snow, and presses it to the wall until it takes the brick's texture, the mortar's chapped lip. He holds the imprint a while, then lets it melt back into what it always was. At home, a place he treats like a motel room with better books, he turns on the recorder he uses to talk to himself when paper feels like an audience. He says the words out loud to see if they perjure themselves. Hinge, oil, door, stairwell, alley, light, culvert, scarf, key, nickel, lighter, parka, floss, label, thrift, receipt, rental, exhale, rehearsal, exit. He stops and lets the room wear the chain like a necklace it did not agree to. He rewinds and listens. He hears his own breath between nouns like winter between buildings. He turns the machine off and writes a note to himself on the back of an envelope. Do not fall in love with the answer. Fall in love with the work. The DA schedules a pre-trial conference and packs it like a suitcase before a long trip. Only what you need. Everything else can be bought on the road if you have to. The defense sharpens motions into needles. The judge's clerk mutters about snow delays with a tone that says the weather is a poorly managed defendant. Renteria visits Lena's mother before the week stiffens. He doesn't bring news. He brings presence. They sit at her table and drink tea that wants milk. She asks him a question people always ask him, like it was invented in the room. Will this end? He says he hopes for a verdict. He does not promise an ending. She nods like someone who has learned to translate. She shows him a small painting she found behind a bigger one in Lena's closet years ago. Too painful then, easier now. It's a door. Of course it is. The hinge is wrong in the painting. It trembles on the paper like it wants to leave the frame. In the corner, the ghost of an erased signature. She says she thinks Lena hated it for not behaving. He says maybe she loved it for telling the truth. Night again. Denver is a quieter animal in the snow. Streetlights bloom halos. The foxglove door announces every arrival with a slow, soft push. The red scarf by the hook shines like a warning that refused to go pale. The bartender kills the last light and locks the deadbolt and then, because the city taught her, checks the hinges with a fingertip. It feels like superstition. It feels like skill. It feels like a sentence the city is learning to write. Locks are only half the story. The voice keeps going because it must. It gathers the hinge and the culvert and the key and the scarf and the algorithm and the nickel and the lighter and the label and the receipt and the breath of a building and lays them in a row, not because rows are comforting, but because there is dignity in order when chaos is the easy sell. It refuses to give you the last reel. It refuses to promise a verdict that will let you sleep. It promises only this: we are closer than we were. We are not where we pretend to be. We will keep knocking until the door we need to open understands the difference between entry and escape. Snow resets the crime like a curtain call that refuses to end, and the city returns to its lines with the resignation of actors in a long run. The pretrial conference slides one day for weather, which feels like an omen to people who still believe in omens, and a scheduling note to everyone else. Inside the DA's office, fluorescent noon grinds on. Outside, the streets practice silence on black ice. Renteria arrives early, not out of superstition, out of habit a body earns when years teach it that being 5 minutes ahead is the only mercy you can buy. He brings coffee that tastes like a decision and the notebook with Jason written on the first page, now softened by weeks of thumbprints and snowmelt. The night before, a plow carved lines through the cul-de-sacs, and the city logged every inch. GPS pings, blade height, passes. Bureaucracy is a hoarder. Sometimes it keeps the thing you need by accident. A city analyst, the kind who loves data more than applause, emails a small discovery at 2 a.m. with a subject line that looks embarrassed to be awake. Plow telemetry, FEB, 1998. Interesting. Back then, the city ran a trial on 2 trucks for breadcrumb tracking, a pilot no one funded past March. The logs survive, crisp as frost. One of those trucks rolled past the Foxglove block on 2/14/98 at 01:37 and logged a pause, 22 seconds, near the alley mouth. A second pause, 41 seconds, at the culvert access road at 01:52. The driver claims no memory now. He was young, the night was a book without pictures, the pause could have been a cigarette, the pause could have been a gear grind, the pause could have been the city holding its breath between one door shutting and another opening. Still, Sequence loves timestamps. The DA pins the times to the whiteboard with a satisfaction that doesn't show up in front of a judge. The defense files a new angle. A lab in California is willing to call the algorithm a confidence mirage. They submit affidavits with polite knives in them, footnotes that yawn like trapdoors. The judge reads with patience learned the hard way and writes an order that is both narrow and wide. Disclose enough. Let the jury hear enough. Keep the magic tricks in the bag. Lawyers translate that into a choreography only they can love. The city learns a new pairing of words, Daubert hearing, and pretends it isn't bored. Meanwhile, the laundromat payphone does what old machines do when you ask them for one more miracle. It refuses. The line goes dead for 2 days, then wakes as if offended by the idea of retirement. No new note, no new voice, just dial tone that hums the key of a room kept alive by coins and steam. Hinges continue to be the honest things. The building on Franklin, under scrutiny as if it had been trying to get attention all along, coughs up an invoice discovered by a new property manager who thought the old file cabinet would make a good side table. Under a stack of vendor surveys, a thin carbon slips free. Maint order 21098. Stair abrasion. Lube all hinges. Check offset pivots. Tech initials. EM. In the comments, a word that went invisible until this second. Quiet. Not capitalized. Not emphasized. Just quiet. Renteria circles it not because it is dramatic, but because it is ordinary. Violence organized by a person who writes quiet in the space where other men write completed. A bus archive coughs too. Back then, cameras weren't standard, but conductors carried disposable Kodaks for incident reports, a relic of a policy 2 supervisors fought over and then forgot to rescind. A box of prints returns from deep storage when someone cleaning out a transit locker calls a number on a faded memo. The photos are the city in stutters, fights, fare disputes, snow behind glass. In one, dated 2/14/98, time-stamped 0144 by a printed-on ink that hated cold, a reflection slices across the bus windshield as it idles at a red near Colfax and Franklin. The rear corner of a maintenance van, a cube of shadow with a ladder ghosting up the back, and a cluster of papers stuck to the inside of the rear window. The cluster is trash. It's also a habit, a pair of parking stubs, and one long, thin permit the city used to print for after-hours infrastructure access. The corner of the permit shows a diagonal hash and a smear. The lab scowls at the blur and grinds on it anyway. The smear carries a ghost of a dye in the magenta range, a pigment used by Cullies in their stamp ink the year they switched suppliers. Nobody cheers. Everyone notices the way the thread refuses to snap. Lena's friend sits with a composite artist, not for a face, but for a mood. They sketch the back door, the argument, the man with quiet boots, the folded parka. The artist refuses romance. He draws shadows where they belong and leaves them where they were. He didn't want the coat to learn anything, she repeats, and the artist draws the coat's fold so flat it looks ironed. Later, a juror who hasn't been chosen yet will look at that drawing and feel something shift without knowing why. Later still, a podcast will call it the folded coat portrait and give it a soundtrack too sad for the job. For now, it's paper and graphite and a phrase that keeps ringing a bell you can't see. At the pretrial, the courtroom coughs on its own heat. Evan sits between counsel like a bridge between two banks the river chose. His face is neutral until it isn't. When the hinge evidence is discussed, a tendril of attention pulls him forward by half an inch. When the culvert rental logs come up, he blinks slow. Maybe dust, maybe nothing. Maybe the mind reaching for a door it swore was sealed. His lawyer is quick with the water cup, quick with the whisper, quick with the theater that says we are unthreatened. The DA stays in the narrow lanes the judge painted and makes the lane look bigger by driving perfectly straight. The judge grants, denies, splits hairs into quarters. The algorithm will speak, but modestly. The hinges will be allowed to hum. The keys will jingle in the story but not sing solo. Court adjourns. The benches exhale. News trucks scrape their tripods across wet tile. The word solved survives the hearing and crawls along the bottom of TV screens like a beetle that refuses to die. People at home chew dinner and stare at the crawl and say finally and we'll see and I remember that winter and I don't want my kid walking alone. The city eats its memory in small bites, washes it down with forecasts. The foxglove turns up the music one notch, a soft denial that makes the room easier to survive. The red scarf by the door holds its color like stubborn fire. Another box arrives at the precinct, this one from a man who used to live above the band manager's office, a rental so temporary it never learned the shape of his furniture. In the box, zines, flyers, a stapler that never runs out because no one knows where to buy staples for it anymore, and a stack of handbills for a Valentine's show in '98. On the back of one, a scrawl, back door stuck. J. knock. The K is a joke arrow, pointing to Jason. The humor tastes wrong now, but the ink is obedient. It tells you where the back door stuck, which door, which hinge plate. The same model Lena sketched, the variant with the offset pivot. Renteria lays the flyer next to the sketch and the maintenance order and the photograph of the stair wedge and imagines a room learning to open the wrong way for the right hands. The contractor's summer intern, now a mother of two who thinks about her old boxes only when the boxes think about her, emails a scan of a form she used to fill by rote. Key issuance acknowledgement. The signature line in '98 carries initials, not a name. The initials repeat, EM. The defense will say shop practice and shared pens. The DA will say repetition is a kind of confession only paper knows how to hear. The intern remembers one thing that isn't paper. A man who always returned, borrowed things cleaner than he got them, and an odd courtesy. He wiped the metal with a rag that smelled like petroleum. He said it keeps the winter out, she writes. He was careful in a way that now feels like a warning. Renteria hears the rest stop call again in his head at red lights and in the elevator and in the quiet between breaths. He doesn't ignore it, he doesn't worship it. He asks a different question of it this time. Not did you see her, but who else might have believed they did and why? He calls hotline logs from that month, that year. He reads the kind of grief that arrives as hallucination and sees the pattern. Sightings cluster after anniversaries and news hits, a bouquet of hope and guilt that smells like both. He highlights one call from late March '98. Woman in truck stop bathroom sees girl with plum scarf, hair still damp from snow, eyes that knew the word choose. The note in the margin is as human as any. Caller crying, unsure, wants to help, asks if she should have said hello. There's no name, just a number long dead, a line that will never ring again. He copies the note anyway because the case is a museum of people who called too late and called anyway. Trial date hangs over the calendar like weather, a forecast you believe until a new model tells you the storm will split. The judge pushes it once to let expert schedules line up. The city groans and adjusts its breath. The DA uses the extra days to file a motion in Lamini about lighters, nickel, and the red-capped key jar, 3 nouns arranged like knives in a drawer. The defense lifts one knife and calls it ordinary, lifts another and calls it prejudice, lifts the third and calls it fantasy, saddled on plastic. The judge allows the knives in the drawer, not waved in the air, not pointed, but present. A victory that tastes like room temperature water, necessary, unsatisfying. Lena's mother starts attending the knit night at the library because her house feels too quiet, and the women there talk about weather and recipes and how to fix sleeves, and no one asks if she's ready for closure. They don't use that word there. They use words like bind off and selvage and broomstick lace, words that do the humble work of turning string into fabric. She brings a skein the color of sky just before dark and learns the hinge of a new stitch, where the needle slides under and lifts and the whole line alters. She goes home and doesn't sleep and stands in her kitchen holding the scarf she isn't sure she wants to finish. She begins anyway. The city sneaks its ritual into her hands. A tenant returns from out of state with a memory he didn't know he kept. Once, in '98, he saw the maintenance kid tug a hinge pin with a pair of pliers and grin when it came free like a magician who still believes in the trick. He says the kid was gentle with doors. He says the kid talked to them. He says the kid told him the secret of leaving quietly. Don't ask the lock, ask the hinge. The tenant laughs when he says it, then covers his mouth with his hand as if he's just told a joke at the wrong funeral. He apologizes to the air between them. Renteria writes it down without judgment. Words are tools. Sometimes they build the wrong thing, and sometimes they pry it apart. The algorithm hearing lands on a Monday with clean skies, as if the weather wanted to deny drama to the room. Experts talk in patient harmonies about alleles and mixture models and likelihood ratios and error bounds. The defense statistician does what he's paid to do. He builds doubt scaffolds. The state's expert does what she's paid to do. She takes the scaffolds apart with a smile that never gets cruel. The judge takes notes only she can read. In the hall, a reporter whispers rocket docket because the judge hates drift. In the pews, a grad student in forensic science watches the entire exchange with bright, painful hope that her job will be funded in the future. None of that matters a week from now when the jury isn't supposed to remember this hearing happened. It matters now because the city is learning who gets to speak for science and who doesn't. Night folds itself back over Denver with that old nickel smell, metal, wet wool, the stubborn perfume of survival. The foxglove ring bell clacks one more time. A man at the end of the bar who never talks slides a cardboard box to the bartender and says he found it in a crawl space he was supposed to insulate. The landlord told him to toss what didn't rattle. This rattled, he says, and leaves. Inside, a lamp base without a shade, a plastic bread box with a crack, and a thrift store tag gun with 3 caps left on the T-bars. The bread box holds a smell you could argue about, old plastic and older air. The bartender freezes, breathes, calls Renteria. He arrives like a weather front, touches nothing, looks at everything. Under the tag gun, folded twice and then again, a maintenance order card torn down the middle, the kind with boxes for hinge, lock, latch. The half they have shows hinge, yes, pin, free, note, quai, torn through at the rest of the word. The other half is somewhere in a city that eats its own evidence and then spits out enough. In county, Evan draws again in his head, because a guard took his pen after an inmate traded one for things pens shouldn't buy. He draws a door with no lock, only hinges, and tries to remember when he learned to prefer one to the other. The chaplain arrives and asks if he wants to talk about Winter. Evan asks if Winter wants to talk back. The chaplain says no and laughs. And for a moment, both men are just people who lived through too many Februaries. Then the moment closes like a door with a good latch and a better hinge. The city sleeps. The city doesn't. Snow lowers the volume on everything but sirens and trains. Renteria stands at his window watching a stray dog test the world with its nose. His phone hums with nothing new. He rewinds the recorder from last night's catalog of nouns and plays it again, listening for the weak link that will become the strong one if he pushes where it hurts. He catches himself whispering a word he hates, closure, and corrects it to verdict, and corrects that to truth, and corrects that to proof. He smiles without pleasure. He writes on an envelope, "If the story holds when whispered, it will hold when sworn." Morning returns like a decision made on your behalf. The DA files the final pretrial brief. The defense faxes a letter that tastes like smoke. The judge posts a schedule the clerks could recite in their sleep. The whiteboard in the war room sheds one sticky note and accepts another, the choreography of preparation choosing where to rest. The box from the crawl space sits in evidence, newly tagged, newly serious. The scarf sleeps in plastic. The streetlight lens shard does its small job of remembering. The keycap adhesive keeps its quiet rhyme. The hinge pin wears its parallel bite marks like rings earned, not chosen. The city straightens its back. The word solved keeps crawling across screens, and the voice refuses to swat it away or encourage it. The voice keeps walking in that lane between patience and pressure, between door and hinge, between a winter night and the morning it owes. It keeps us there, not to punish, not to tease, but because the truth is a room you enter slowly, and only after you've learned which part of the door you were supposed to ask permission from all along. Jury selection sounds dull until you watch it eat a city. The room becomes a mirror maze. People step in, see themselves reflected in laws they never thought they'd need, and decide if they can hold still long enough to call that fairness. The judge's clerk reads names like a slow metronome, a teacher who locks her classroom door in a rhythm that keeps nightmares away, a mechanic who swears by hinges over deadbolts without meaning to say anything philosophical, a podcaster's fan who promises he won't listen to the show during the trial and means it the way people mean, "I'll quit tomorrow," a woman who knitted through chemo, now knitting through nerves, the yarn a steady river beneath her fingers. The DA watches posture. The defense listens for heat and verbs. Renteria sits behind them all and recites easily provable facts in his head like a rosary he doesn't know the words for. The judge lays the ground plain as concrete, beyond reasonable doubt, not beyond all doubt. Evidence is not popularity. Outrage is not proof. The room pretends not to flinch. Voir dire turns into a choreography of questions that circle what no one can say outright. Did the words solved already mark your heart up in ink? Can you set it aside? Will you forgive science for sounding confident? Will you punish caution for not being television? A man in a baseball cap says he can be fair if both sides promise not to use the word closure. The judge smiles in her throat and nods him on. At the Foxglove, the bell's hinge gets oiled before opening. The bartender laughs at herself and does it anyway, the small sound of private prayer. She keeps the crawlspace box's absence in her mind like a missing tooth. Your tongue finds it when you're not thinking. The red scarf by the door has begun to smell faintly of smoke from 1,000 shoulders brushing past. A card on the jar reads simply, "For the long work. Money collects the way snow does under a fence, uneven, determined." The laundromat payphone coughs dial tone like an old smoker who refuses to quit. The owner wipes it down, not because it needs it, because ritual makes the day make sense. The detective calls from across the street and hangs up the second the line picks up so he can hear the click in his ear and be sure the universe is still connected to itself. Jury seated, not perfect, never is. 12 and 2 chores of fate. The opening statements do their old dance. The DA builds a road of nouns and dates and wherefores, promising to walk only where the asphalt holds. The defense draws a fog where the road should be and invites the jury to notice how fog feels like a fact when you're inside it. They both look at Evan like he's an answer sheet they're not allowed to touch. He sits leaning back by intention, suit borrowed and squared, hands quiet unless they aren't. His eyes slide over the exhibits table the way a man scans a hardware aisle, identifying, not coveting. The only time he smiles is at a joke the judge makes about cell phones. It's a regular human smile that makes half the gallery shift uncomfortably because regular feels like an accusation in rooms like this. Witnesses come like beads, each held up to the light, each threaded on a story that refuses to call itself a necklace. The thrift clerk first, palms flat, weather in her voice. She tells the parka story without poetry. She says bread box, and the courtroom hears container whether it wants to or not. She apologizes for the label stitching, then rescues herself with a small, stubborn sentence. We did what we could with what we had. The defense nods as if in deep agreement with her poverty and uses it to plant a seed. Thrift is sloppy memories cut wrong. She leaves the stand relieved and a little ashamed for reasons no law can metabolize. The city engineer follows with his napkin, not the paper itself, but the drawing redone clean, the culvert gate speaker turned down to fax. He explains the dog that could be loosened, the lockbox that might be a jaw. He uses words like offset pivot and returns to them when the DA asks him to sing. The defense likes him, he smells like competence, and tries to make that competence hurt him. So anyone could do it? The lawyer asks. Anyone who practiced, the engineer says, carrying gravity in the small claws no one can sand down. The locksmith arrives with his pencil and his microscope photos, crescent wear and bite marks paraded like fossils. He says the phrase that had lived in Renteria's head since the first day: the body learns the shape of entrances. The courtroom doesn't gasp, it exhales. The defense calls it poetry. He shrugs and calls it years. He's too old to be bullied by adjectives. The hinge takes the stand through pictures and swabs and numbers that look like mountain ranges to the untrained eye. The lab tech's voice is careful the way a person's is when they've been punished for confidence before. She says brand discontinued in 2004 like a bell rung with two fingers. She says preservative signature matches with intolerance. She says likely, probable, consistent. The defense picks those words up like rocks and throws them gently, letting the small thuds land in juror laps. They ask if petroleum jelly can be bought by anyone. She says yes and doesn't apologize for the universe being large. The algorithm day comes, and the courtroom becomes a classroom. Patience is the only price of admission. The state's expert, a woman whose calm has its own weight, walks likelihood ratios down from Olympus. She explains mixture, low template, stochastic thresholds, all the ghosts inside a whisper of DNA. She doesn't flirt with certainty. She invites the jury to stand in a range. The defense statistician does what he is paid to do. He frets aloud about error rates like a priest frets about doctrine. He says the word mirage and the jury blinks. The judge reminds them gently that mirage is not a scientific term, and they blink again, this time with something like gratitude. Somewhere between exhibits 42 and 47, the bus photo arrives, the reflection on the windshield that turned every skeptic's shoulders a little. The cluster of papers in the van window is nothing and something. The permit corner with magenta smear hums on the screen. The DA doesn't call it a smoking gun. He calls it a rhyme. The word has wandered from the whiteboard into the air, from thought into evidence. He shows the rental invoices. He shows the initials. He shows the policy. He doesn't point his finger. He lets the diagram point for him. The defense talks about shared logins and borrowed vans and the way paper inherits lies when people get lazy. The jury looks at the photo again when no one is speaking. Silence moves through the room on cat feet. Lena's friend testifies and becomes, in that instant, the most important person alive. She tells about the argument by the back door, the landlord's voice hitting the brittle pitch of a man who thinks policy is a personality, the quiet boots, the folded parka. He carried it like it was listening, she says. And the court reporter looks up because sometimes words decide to be famous. The defense is gentle with her because anything else would stain. They ask about lighting, time, distance, whether the memory wore the years or the years wore the memory. She answers without sharpening. She does not pretend that recall is a muscle that never fatigues. She says the color of the night was the kind that makes sidewalks sound like they're thinking. No one laughs. The judge doesn't admonish. The sentence sits, an animal that wandered in and decided to lie down. Then the boxes, the crawl space box with its lamp base, the bread box with its faint wrong smell, the tag gun like an old toy that bit. The evidence tech gloved and solemn, the DA cautious not to turn relics into sacraments. The torn maintenance card, hinge, yes, pin, free, note, quai, appears under document camera glare. The jury floats toward the unfinished word like moths. Quiet, quick, quit. Everyone completes it differently in their heads. The defense makes their best argument of the day here. This city is a collage of paper, counsel says. You can make any picture you want. The jurors don't smile. Collage is still picture. They know that. They also know some pictures feel truer than others. Evan watches all of it with the subdued hunger of a man studying a machine he could fix if they let him touch it. When the hinge photographs go up, his index finger twitches once on his knee as if flicking a lighter. Renteria sees it because he is watching that hand with the concentration of a locksmith learning a new lock by ear. The chaplain later will say gestures don't convict. Renteria will nod. He doesn't believe in convictions by gesture. He believes in the way gestures stack inside a room until the air knows the shape of them. A recess. The hallway becomes its own court with different rules. Reporters form small shoals. A man in a suit tells a woman why hinges matter like he learned it 5 minutes ago and wants credit for having been born smart. The Foxglove's owner stands back with his hands in his apron pockets and watches the city try to teach itself a new vocabulary. He gets a text. The jar is full again. He smiles without joy. Later he'll tape the cash into bundles that look like nothing and take it nowhere because sometimes helping is only a way to stop your hands from shaking. Back inside, the janitor, older now, dignity like a buttoned coat, takes the stand and talks about a building that learned to exhale. He does not embellish. He says he found the red-capped key and hung it for the world to be honest about. He says it vanished. He says he's sorry he didn't guard it like treasure. The DA thanks him as if apologies are a kind of evidence they get to keep. The defense asks him whether he believes in ghosts. He says yes without blinking because some words refuse to turn into jokes just because a lawyer wants them to. Lena's mother comes because a person cannot avoid the gravity of a room that is about their child. She sits without knitting. She rests her hand on the bench as if feeling for the hinge. When the voicemail plays, not to the jury, but to authenticate that the voice belongs to the life, she closes her eyes at the first syllable and opens them 2 syllables after the last, timed exactly to keep tears in their lanes. When she leaves for the hallway's cold air, Renteria follows, not to say anything, just to be the height of a person she can stand beside without needing to explain why she is upright. Evenings. The city goes on auditioning for normal. Plows sleep. Sidewalk salt clumps into ghosts. Restaurants seat couples who cannot tell their laughter from the newsroom's blue glow at the edge of their vision. The laundromat eats quarters in a rhythm that feels older than court. The payphone holds its line steady like an old watch keeping faith. Jason, no longer Jason, declines to testify. The court can compel memory only so far. His absence feels like a shadow of a door that used to be there. The judge instructs the jury not to wonder about who isn't in the room. The jury wonders anyway and then tells themselves not to. Cross-examinations bite where they can. The defense counts every place the word likely stands in for is. The DA answers with corridors of sequence you can walk without falling through. The judge allows and sustains like a conductor, keeping music from rushing. The algorithm argument lands not as a drum, as a metronome. Tick, scarf mixture. Talk, partial ridge. Tick, database now with teeth. Talk, match leans. Tick, other lab checks. Talk, number rising, never shouting. By the end, the jury knows that certainty wears work clothes here. It doesn't own a tux. Night before the defense case, Renteria drives the road again with the window down, cold a pen the air uses to rewrite your lungs. Foxglove to Ogden, Ogden to Colfax, Colfax to Franklin, Franklin to the Culvert Road. He parks and kills the lights. The snowbanks hold footprints like sentences that refuse to be said twice. He walks to the lip and listens for the nothing that taught a city to hear. He says out loud the note he wrote on an envelope days ago because sometimes the brain needs to hear the throat agree. Do not fall in love with the answer. Fall in love with the work. The wind answers with a shrug. Defense witnesses carry the usual cargo. An old coworker who thinks Evan once brought donuts on a Tuesday. A neighbor who never saw him angry. A cousin who swears he hates winter and would never go out at night unless someone made him. They do what they're meant to do, remind the room that men who do bad things were infants once and sometimes nice to dogs. The defense floats a theory no one believes, but everyone has to watch walk past. Another man, another van, another key, another winter. The alternate is a silhouette with the wrong gait. The jury watches it and feels their shoulders itch, a nickel irritation at a watch band that never fit. When court breaks for the day, the podcast tries to catch up and fails because the room is faster than the internet when truth decides to move. Comment sections bloom and wilt in cycles. The phrase of the week, don't ask the lock, ask the hinge, slips onto t-shirts and into jokes and then into nightmares. People check their doors twice and their hinges once and feel clever and then feel cheap and then do it again anyway. Lena's mother finishes the scarf at the library and unravels the last 2 inches at home because the act of ending something is a cliff her heart refuses to walk off. She leaves the yarn loose like a question and puts the work in a bag she keeps by the door. If you saw it without context, you would think it was ready to wear. If you knew, you'd see it as a verb. Evan lies on his bunk under the weight of a blanket that learned the smell of 1,000 men and forgot each one. The chaplain sits for a while without speaking. When he does, he asks if Evan wants to pray. Evan says he wants a door that opens without sound. The chaplain says that's not a prayer he knows. Evan says it's the only one he has. The chaplain nods and leaves him to a night that doesn't count minutes, only breaths. And Denver, stubborn, snowlit, practiced at surviving its own headlines, goes to bed with the word solved still crawling along a screen in some rooms and turned off in others. The voice does not turn it off for you and does not turn it up. It keeps you in the corridor between locks and hinges, in the stairwell where buildings learn to exhale, in the culvert's jaw where metal remembers the fingers that taught it to loosen. It doesn't grant you the ending the calendar has promised. It gives you the next morning instead, with court at 9 and testimony sharp as cold air, and tells you, in a tone that refuses to be a command, to show up. Because the truth is not a destination, it is attendance. It is the patience to keep your seat while the city arranges its small, honest pieces and asks the door again, politely this time, to open.